My wife left for a month with the hot new neighbor. I filed for divorce, she tried to fix it, but I'm not a backup. I guess I'm writing this to get it out of my system. My name is Mike, I'm 31 and until lately, I felt I had my life under control. I've always been a simple guy, no big dreams, no crazy drama. I had a regular career as a software developer, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and, until recently, I believed I had a strong marriage with a woman I truly loved. Laura and I met almost 8 years ago. Looking back, it seems like a lifetime ago. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first job, and frankly, naive about life. She was 22, working as an assistant at a marketing agency while trying to figure out her own career path. For the record, she never did and eventually became a stay-at-home wife. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, one of those casual backyard gatherings when everyone is using cheap paper plates and someone is always burning the burgers. She approached me and made a snarky jest about how I appeared to be planning my escape. I can't recall my response, but she laughed, and we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. From then, everything went quickly. We started dating, and it felt like she gave some excitement to my otherwise mundane and routine life. Laura was adventurous and spontaneous, always planning last-minute road trips or bringing me to a new restaurant she had heard about. Meanwhile, I remained the grounded one. I'd be the one to figure out the budget, check the weather, and double-check the gas tank before we hit the road. It seems to work. We balance each other out. She brought excitement into my life, and I offered her the steadiness she stated she lacked in previous relationships. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. The wedding was intimate, with only relatives and close friends. We didn't come from wealthy households, so there was no grand ballroom or extravagant catering, but that didn't matter. After the wedding, we began to establish a life together. We purchased a little 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, not the fanciest location, but it had potential. For the most part, things seemed stable. When I got home from work, Laura was generally in the kitchen or on the couch, browsing through her phone. She would tell me stories from her day. She worked in marketing at the time, so there was always some drama with clients or coworkers, and I listened. This was our dynamic. She was the storyteller, and I was the listener. We did not have children, but it was a joint decision. Laura wasn't in a rush, and neither was I. We both preferred to wait until we were more financially stable and prepared for the next major step. We seemed to agree on the majority of issues. Looking back, I wonder if I became too comfortable. It's easy to get into a pattern, especially when life feels stable. I would get up, go to work, return home, and repeat. Of course, we had date nights, which usually consisted of supper at one of our favorite restaurants or a movie. But I believe I stopped noticing the small details, like how Laura seemed to thrive on attention. It wasn't too horrible, at least not at first. She's the type of person that can brighten a room, and people instinctively draw towards her. I guess I began to take her vitality and warmth for granted, expecting they were a continuous part of our lives together. At the moment, I wasn't concerned. I assumed we were solid. Sure, we had disagreements now and then, what marriage doesn't? Most of the time, it was about little matters, such as me forgetting to take out the garbage or her leaving her shoes scattered throughout the home. Nothing significant. But there's this issue about relationships. They can appear fine on the outside while cracks occur quietly underneath. If you don't pay attention, those cracks might expand and cause the entire foundation to crumble. I didn't see it coming, at least not then. I thought we were constructing something robust and long-lasting. But sometimes life has a way of proving you incorrect. Jake, a new character, entered our lives. Jake moved in next door when his former neighbors, an elderly couple, downsized and relocated to Florida. He was roughly 28 years old at the time, making him younger than the majority of the residents in the neighborhood. He was a personal trainer, fit, confident, and admittedly a little too attractive for his own good. He had the type of body that made people look twice, as if he had just stepped out of an action film. Jake was easy to notice from the moment he moved in. Not just because of his appearance, but because he was always outside doing something, washing his car, mowing the lawn, erecting a pull-up bar in his yard. There was always a reason for him to go shirtless. He quickly became the buzz of the neighborhood. Laura spotted him right away. How could she not? We first met Jake when he came over to introduce himself while we were in the yard one Saturday morning. He was pleasant, the type of person who could charm anyone. Laura started up a discussion with him almost immediately, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and how he liked the neighborhood. I recall standing there, smiling and nodding, barely able to say anything while the two of them chatted like old friends. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Laura was outgoing, she spoke to everyone. She'd be just as chatty with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. It never seemed to me that there was anything unusual about her interest in Jake. But, looking back, I can see the subtle alterations that occurred after that. It started with casual talks. Laura always found a cause to join Jake outside. At first, it was small tasks like getting the mail, watering the plants, and putting out the trash. However, these brief jobs invariably led to 10 or 15-minute conversations with Jake. I once arrived home from work and discovered them conversing in the driveway. Laura was holding a basket of laundry that she had been carrying to the garage, and Jake was lounging casually against his car, laughing at something she said. When I stepped up, they both turned to me, and Laura pretended it was no big deal. Jake was just telling me about his new gym equipment, she explained casually. It did not stop there. A few weeks later, Laura decided to bake cookies, which she hadn't done in months. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her heading across the yard, a dish of cookies in hand. Just being neighborly, she remarked when I asked her about it. I shrugged it off. Laura's behavior in this regard was not unique. She had previously brought brownies to other neighbors. But then there was the time she purchased a new set of training clothes. Bright, fitted leggings and a matching top, which was not something she would ordinarily wear. When I asked her about it, she said she was thinking about starting to jog again. You know, to get back into shape, she explained. I did not question it. Laura had previously gone through fitness phases in which she would become thrilled about working out for a month or two before losing interest. But this time, her timing was ideal. Jake jogged virtually every morning. I'd see him out there, headphones in, doing laps around the street. Laura determined her new jogging program would begin at the same time Jake was out there. I noticed them speaking on the sidewalk one morning as I was going for work. Laura was stretching, and Jake was showing her a way to avoid shin splints. I didn't say anything, just a short wave and drove away. But something in the scene stuck with me. Around this time, I saw Laura's phone habits change as well. She'd always been on her phone, reading around social media and contacting her buddies. But now she appeared wary. When I stepped into the room, she would swiftly lock her screen or flip her phone over, as if she didn't want me to see anything. One night, I observed her scrolling through Instagram, and when I looked over, I saw Jake's name at the top. She hastily swiped past it, but I saw enough to know she was looking at his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it aside. I was just checking out his fitness posts, she told me. He has some good workout advice. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But the small things kept stacking up. Another day, I was working in the garage and heard laughter coming from the backyard. I stepped outside to see Laura and Jake standing near the fence, laughing about something. Laura was holding an iced tea, and Jake was waving animatedly while telling a story. Laura waved at me as if nothing unusual had occurred. Jake was just telling me about this funny thing that happened at his gym, she explained later when I questioned about it. It was beginning to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to sound paranoid, but you can know when something is wrong. Laura's conversation about Jake had a new energy to it. She'd casually mention things he'd said or done, such as Jake's thinking about getting a dog, or Jake recommended this great protein shake. It wasn't what she was saying, but how she said it. Then there were the glances. You know what I mean. When we went outside and Jake was nearby, I noticed Laura take small glances in his direction. It was subtle, but once you notice it, you can't ignore it. At this moment I had yet to say anything. Part of me refused to think there was anything to worry about. Laura was someone I trusted. We had been together for years, and I thought we had a good relationship. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the pattern, began to question. I chose to be quiet for now, but I began to pay closer attention. If something was happening, I had to witness it for myself. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it vividly because it began off so typical. I got up early, as I always do, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, browsing through the news on my phone. Laura was still in bed, which was not surprising. She enjoyed her slow mornings, particularly on weekends. The house was silent, with only the humming of the coffee machine in the background, and for a brief minute, I felt peaceful. Funny how that works. You think everything is fine because you have no idea what's going to happen. Laura entered the kitchen around an hour later. She was in her pajamas, her hair all tangled from sleeping, holding her phone in one hand and massaging her eyes with the other. She sat across from me at the table, and I could tell something was up right away. She exuded nervous energy, drumming her fingers on the table and gazing at her phone as if she were avoiding eye contact. "Are you okay?" I inquired, setting down my phone. She nodded hastily before shaking her head. "Actually, no," she responded with a big sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone who has been in a relationship understands that those 4 words rarely mean anything good. My stomach knotted, but I tried to keep it cool. All right, I murmured, reclining in my chair. What's going on? Laura paused, her gaze flitting around the room as if she was looking for the proper words. Finally, she looked at me and said, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Jake. For a moment, I believed I had misheard her. What? I asked, leaning forward as if being closer would make the words more clear. She bit her lip, appearing really uncomfortable. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said hurriedly, as if she wanted to avoid the response. It just happened. I've been spending time with Jake, and I feel this connection, and now I'm confused. Confused. That word struck me more than anything else. She did not just express her guilt or admit that she had made a mistake. She expressed her confusion, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. My thoughts raced. Did she mention she wanted to leave? Is she asking for a divorce? Was she trying to confess and move on? I couldn't tell, and that made things worse. So, what does this mean? I inquired finally. Are you saying you're done with us? Laura shook her head rapidly. No, not necessarily, she replied. I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Mike. I do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean. I felt as if the floor had been torn out from beneath me. We'd been together for years, had established a life together, and now she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore. It was surreal. I took a deep breath and tried to hold my voice steady. So, what are you saying? You want to take a break? She hesitated and then nodded. Kind of, she responded. I need time to figure things out. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend some time with Jake and see if there's something real there. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on ourselves. I blinked, astounded by her audacity. You're serious? I asked, without even framing it as a question. Laura nodded, her gaze begging. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I don't want to live with regrets, you know? Regrets. The phrase lingered in my head like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she was the one putting everything on the line, as if my feelings were secondary to her life-changing decisions. I sat there, staring at her, a combination of rage and incredulity boiling beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to yell at her for being so selfish. But another part of me, perhaps the calmer, more calculated side, chose to remain silent and let her dig her own hole. All right, I murmured, reclining back in my chair. Laura blinked, apparently taken off guard. Wait, really? Sure, I replied, shrugging as if it were no great issue. If you think that's what you need, go ahead. Her look flickered, as if she didn't know whether I was being real or mocking. I just think it's the best way to figure out where my heart is, she admitted cautiously. Sure, I replied. Do what you need to do. Inside, I was already finished. When she mentioned she wanted to spend a month with another man, my brain flicked a switch. But I didn't want to show my cards yet. If she was willing to abandon our marriage for a dream with a neighbor, I was curious to see how far she would go. Laura let out a relieved sigh, as if she had just been given permission to accomplish something heroic. Thank you, she replied, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I know this is a lot to ask, but I really believe it's the right thing for us. I stood up and grabbed my coffee mug, pulling my hand away. Sure, I repeated, my voice flat. If that's what you need. She said nothing after that, simply sat there, most likely contemplating the fact that I wasn't arguing or fighting. But within, I was already planning. Laura spent the following few days packing a modest bag. She informed me she'd be staying with Jake, and she made it sound casual, as if it was simply a temporary arrangement. She didn't appear to realize that I wasn't asking inquiries or expressing any resistance. When Laura went, the house felt different. Not empty, but quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life. I stood in the living room after she left, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and stared at the door. I expected to feel angry or heartbroken, but all I felt was a peculiar peace, as if the weight of pretending everything was fine had finally been lifted. I strolled into the kitchen, poured myself a drink of water, and stood there, trying to figure out what had just happened. My wife, whom I had been with for years and expected to spend my life with, had departed to figure things out with the guy next door. If it hadn't been my life, I would have assumed it was some insane TV drama. The first several days felt odd. I started noticing the little things she'd left behind. Her favorite cup on the kitchen counter, a pair of shoes near the entrance, and a blanket thrown over the back of the couch. I considered relocating them, but ultimately chose to leave them where they were. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to waste energy. I poured myself into work, taking on extra assignments to fill my schedule. I stayed late at work not because I had to, but because I didn't want to return home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I went to the gym frequently. I had never been a regular gym goer before, but there was something fulfilling about pushing myself physically, as if I could sweat out all of my stress. Friends began to realize that something was amiss. A few of them inquired as to why Laura was not present, and I responded vaguely. "She's staying with a friend for a while," I explained, attempting to sound casual. I wasn't ready to dive into the real tale yet. My father was the only one I spoke the truth to. I contacted him a few days after Laura left, and the first thing he asked was, "What's wrong?" He's always been able to read me, even over the phone. When I informed him what had happened, there was a prolonged delay on the other end of the call. Then he added, "Well, son, I hate to say it, but it sounds like you're better off without her." At first, I wasn't sure what to reply. I anticipated him to be more furious or ask more questions. But then he said something that remained with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" He was correct. I'd spent so much time trying to understand Laura's decision and find out where I went wrong that I hadn't considered what I deserved. I wasn't just a backup plan in case her affair with Jake didn't work out. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. We seemed so pleased in that image, so certain in our future. But now it simply felt like a reminder of all that had gone wrong. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. I was not going to sit around and wait for Laura to make her big decision. I was planning to make my own. The next day, I called a divorce attorney. Sitting in that lawyer's office felt weird. I detailed the scenario, attempting to maintain a steady voice, even though a part of me still couldn't believe it was true. The lawyer listened intently, nodding as I spoke, and when I finished, he replied, "You are well within your rights to file for divorce. This type of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words made things click in my head. Irreconcilable differences. This is what we would become. Laura and I weren't on the same page anymore, and perhaps we never had been. The lawyer guided me through the process, outlining what I needed to do and what I could expect. By the time I left his office, I had a strange sense of satisfaction, as if I had finally taken charge of my life. Back home, I began taking little efforts to prepare for the inevitable. I transferred some money to a second account in case things became ugly later. I walked through the house and began mentally partitioning what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her belongings yet. I figured I'd wait until things were official, but in my head, I was already planning how the house would look without her. The days stretched into weeks, and I grew accustomed to the stillness. It wasn't as horrible as I expected. In fact, it felt really tranquil. I didn't have to deal with Laura's continual chatter or the minor disagreements over trivial matters like whose turn it was to do the dishes. Meanwhile, I started hearing stuff through the grapevine. A neighbor reported seeing Laura and Jake at the park, looking cozy. Another person claimed to have seen them at a cafe downtown. I nodded and smiled, as if nothing bothered me, but inside I was filled with rage and pity. Anger because she had thrown away everything we owned for a fling with a boy who was unlikely to stick around. Pity, because I knew it wouldn't go well for her. Jake did not strike me as the sort to settle down, and Laura was about to find out the hard way. By the third week, I had stopped checking my phone for Laura's texts. I assumed if she wanted to communicate, she'd reach out, but I wasn't holding my breath. I was finished waiting for her. One night, while cleaning out the garage, I came upon a box of old photos from when Laura and I first met. For a brief period, I felt a stab of sadness as I remembered how happy we had been back then. But then I remembered all the subtle red signs I'd disregarded over the years, all the times I'd prioritized her demands over mine without even recognizing it. I closed and moved the box away. I didn't need those memories. Laura decided to make her spectacular reappearance almost exactly a month ago today. I had not heard anything from her during her brief trial with Jake. The few texts she sent were vague at best. "Hope you're doing okay," or "We'll chat when I get back." She didn't even try to keep me updated or pretend she was torn about her decision. It was as if she had already dismissed me as Plan B. By this point, I had ceased caring. I wasn't waiting by the door for her to come to her senses. I wasn't pacing the house, wondering what she and Jake were doing. I had filed for divorce, and my lawyer had already begun drafting the paperwork. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was ended. But I didn't tell her that just yet. When she went through the door, nothing seemed to have changed, at least for her. She had her bag draped over her shoulder, her hair nicely done, and a confident expression on her face, as if she'd just returned from a trip and was expecting me to roll out the red carpet. "Hey," she said, placing her luggage by the door. "I'm back." I was sitting on the couch, scrolling between channels and scarcely looking up. "Welcome back," I murmured, my tone remaining neutral. She paused, as if she was anticipating more of a response. When I didn't jump up or inquire how it went, she walked over and perched on the couch's arm. "We should talk," she stated quietly and carefully. I turned to face her and muted the TV. "All right," I replied, crossing my arms. "Talk." Laura smiled, the kind of smile she used when she was trying to make things better. "I've done a lot of thinking," she told me. "And I've realized some things. About myself. About us, about what I want." I simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a big breath, as if she were ready to give an impassioned statement. "I care about you, Mike. I really do. And I think we can work through this. I think we can rebuild what we have." Rebuild. She stated it as if it were as simple as repairing a leaking faucet. I didn't say anything, simply looked at her, allowing her to fill the silence. She was perplexed by my silence, but she persisted. "Jake's a great guy," she remarked, and I had to bite my tongue to stop giggling at how casually she mentioned him. "But I realized he's not what I need. He's fun, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have the stability that you have, and I think I was just caught up in the excitement of it all." There it was. Her big revelation. She tried out the shiny new toy and decided she liked the old one more. "Uh-huh," I replied, my voice cool. Laura blinked, as if she expected a more intense reply. "I know I've hurt you," she murmured, reaching out and touching my arm. "But I really believe we can get past this. We've been through so much together, Mike. We have history. That's not something you just throw away." I let her continue. I let her unload all of her perfectly practiced phrases about love, forgiveness, and beginning over. When she finished talking, I rose up and walked over to the kitchen counter. I unlocked a drawer, pulled out the divorce papers my lawyer had sent over, and placed them on the table in front of her. "What's this?" she inquired, her smile fading. "Divorce papers," I explained simply. Her face turned pallid. "You're kidding," she exclaimed, releasing a frightened laugh. "Nope," I replied, leaning against the counter, arms folded. "I'm not kidding." For a time, she stared at the papers, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she glanced up at me with big eyes. "You're divorcing me?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in being your second choice, Laura." Her face went from shock to angry in an instant. "Second choice?" she demanded. "That's not what this is." I was confused, Mike. I needed time to figure things out. "And in the process, you decided to test the waters with another man," I added calmly. "You left. You walked out on our marriage. And now you're back because it didn't work out with him. Do you honestly think I'm just going to take you back like nothing happened?" Laura opened her mouth to argue before closing it again, her face growing red. "It's not like that," she responded, her voice quivering. "I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and resent you. I thought—" She trailed off, her gaze darting across the room. "You thought you could have it both ways," I said for her. She stood up and crossed her arms. "You're making a mistake, Mike. We can fix this." "I know we can." "No," I replied firmly. "We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She appeared to be about to cry, but I didn't let that affect me. I had already made up my mind. The remainder of the conversation was a haze. She tried to argue and guilt me into altering my mind. She discussed our history, our home, and even the possibility of starting a family someday. But nothing worked. Finally, she stormed out of the house. I stood there for a time, staring at the empty area where she had been, without feeling anything. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts, only relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to inform him that Laura had seen the paperwork. He said, "How'd she take it?" "Not great," I remarked, smirking. "Do you want to give her time to process, or should we move forward?" "Move forward," I instructed without hesitation. It wasn't easy standing up to Laura, but it was ultimately the correct thing to do. She viewed me as a backup plan in case her fling didn't work out. And if she believed I'd take it, she obviously didn't know me as well as she imagined. I knew she would not give up easily. Laura was not the sort to simply walk away from a confrontation, especially one in which she thought she was losing. I'd hardly sat down when my phone buzzed with a text from her. "This isn't over." I gazed at the message for a second before locking my phone and throwing it on the couch. She was correct, it was not over. Not yet. But it would happen soon enough. The following several days were eventful, to say the least. Laura arrived unannounced the next evening, beating on the door as if she were attempting to break it down. "Mike, open the door," she exclaimed. I opened it, keeping a bland attitude. "What do you want, Laura?" She rushed by me and stormed into the living room, as if she still lived there. "We need to talk," she stated, pacing back and forth. "You can't just file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "You had your chance," I replied quietly. "You made your decision when you left." "That's not fair," she responded, her voice rising. "I didn't leave to end our marriage, I left to figure things out, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying." I could not help but laugh dryly. "And in doing that, you proved you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by running off to someone else, Laura. That's not how it works." She paused pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. "I was confused," she remarked, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what I wanted, but I know now. I want us, Mike. I want to fix this." "Too late," I replied, my tone strong. "You don't get to come back now just because things didn't work out with Jake." Her face contorted in rage, and she aimed a finger at me. "You're being petty," she said. "You're throwing away everything we built over one mistake." I shook my head, maintaining my composure. "It wasn't just one mistake, Laura. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Jake. You chose to prioritize your feelings for him over our marriage. And then you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions." She opened her lips to argue, but then stopped, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she appeared defeated. "What am I supposed to do now?" she inquired quietly. I sighed, feeling pity for her, despite everything she had done. "That's not my problem anymore," I explained. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She waited for another minute, looking as if she wanted to say anything else, but then she walked out without saying anything. Following that, the divorce proceedings went fast. Laura attempted to drag things out at first, perhaps expecting I would change my mind. She even tried to play the victim in front of our mutual acquaintances, accusing me of being cold and cruel. My father, on the other hand, was completely on my side. When I told him about the scenario, he let out a low whistle. "She's got some nerve," he commented. "But I'm proud of you, son. Standing your ground isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do." Laura's stalling tactics proved ineffective. My lawyer was sharp, and the proof of her leaving for Jake made things quite clear. She attempted to plead for spousal support, stating she had given up her profession for the marriage, but the judge did not buy it. Finally, we reached a reasonable deal. She received a modest sum of money and some of the furniture she'd chosen, but I kept the house and the most of my savings. It was not ideal, but it was better than I had anticipated. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the documents that would officially end our marriage, felt strange. I glanced across at Laura a few times. She appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer handed her a pen, and for a brief minute, I assumed she was not going to sign. But eventually, she scribbled her name at the bottom of the sheet, completing the transaction. Following the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. "Mike," she spoke softly, just above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at her, hoping to recognize the person I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but all I saw was someone I used to know. "I know you are," I replied. "But sorry doesn't fix this." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to hug me, but I pulled aside. "Take care of yourself, Laura," I whispered, starting to walk away. I'd occasionally hear tidbits about Laura through the grapevine. Jake obviously moved on to someone else shortly after she returned to me. According to one common friend, she was currently living with a relative and figuring out her next moves. I didn't feel satisfied hearing about her problems, but I also didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her decisions, and now she was dealing with the consequences. One day, I ran into her at the supermarket. We locked eyes briefly, and I could see remorse written all over her face. She gave me a little hesitant wave, but I simply nodded and moved past. There was nothing more to say. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled situations. Laura believed she could have it both ways. She could go, pursue her feelings for someone else, then return to me if it didn't work out. But life does not operate that way. I've learned a lot about myself along this process. I realize now that I deserve someone who cherishes me and does not consider me as a last resort. And if that individual is out there, fantastic. If not, that's okay too. For the time being, my primary goal is to reconstruct my life on my own terms. Laura's trial run with Jake may have been her way of gaining clarity, but it was a wake-up call I didn't realize I needed. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I was harassed by my coworkers for suddenly losing weight after undergoing emergency surgery to remove an 18-pound tumor. I just came back to work after a month-long emergency medical leave. The TLDR is that after a decade of medical gaslighting, a new doctor ordered an emergency MRI during a routine visit and discovered a mass in my abdomen. I was rushed into surgery within 24 hours. I ended up having an 18-pound benign tumor pressing on my vital organs, and I was about a week away from multiple organ failure. I'm lucky to be alive, and time will tell if I have any lasting organ damage, but right now everything is fine. Mentally I'm struggling with a few things, but the only outwardly noticeable impact is that I've gone from a size 20 to a size 8. Nobody on my medical team anticipated a change this drastic, but I'm healthy and lucky. I was expecting to get a lot of questions from my coworkers because curiosity exists. I had a basic emergency surgery, but I'm fine now. Answer that almost everyone accepted but one coworker who I hardly speak to, Aubrey. On my first day back to work, Aubrey came up to me and said, "I wish you had come to me to lose weight instead of resorting to such drastic measures. You're going to gain it all back. You know, I'll be waiting." I was aware of Aubrey's reputation, but since we never worked together I didn't think it would be an issue. She's one of those people who thinks they're a fitness expert and calls herself a health coach, nothing to do with the company we work for. She has a reputation for giving out unsolicited and incorrect health advice, and is always commenting on people's food choices. I was speechless when she asked why I opted to get butchered instead of putting in the hard work to lose the weight. There's nothing wrong with someone choosing surgical weight loss options, but that's not what happened to me, and I really resented her aggressive attitude spreading rumors. During my second week back, she came by my office at the end of the day in athletic gear, offering to go with me if I was too afraid to go to the gym alone. At the time I wasn't even cleared to lift my kid, do laundry, or climb a flight of stairs, let alone go to the gym with this crackpot. I don't remember what I said to her, but she left saying I'd gain the weight back because I'm lazy. The next day Aubrey ranted angrily about me in a meeting I wasn't in, missed it for a follow-up, ironically. I don't know everything that was said, but the gist was that if I can't dedicate myself to weight loss, I obviously can't see my work obligations through. HR called for a red flag mediation. At our company, mediation can go against your bonus opportunities for the year. I have no idea why I'm in mediation when she's the one being an asshat. At the mediation, Aubrey stated that she was triggered by my new body, and I should have thought of other people's feelings and warned her before my surgery. I hardly had time to warn my husband and get my kid out of daycare. I don't owe Aubrey anything. I have empathy that she's obviously struggling, but that does not excuse her behavior. HR said that while they can't ask me to explain my medical history, it might clear the air if I told her what kind of surgery I had and why. I said I wasn't obligated to share my medical information with anyone, and that Aubrey having bad coping skills doesn't entitle her to a coworker's personal health information. Their response was kind of, "Well, then we can't stop her from bullying you." After Thanksgiving, my doctor helped me put in ADA accommodation paperwork so I could work from home. I was having some mild complications from surgery, but also to avoid Aubrey. This company hates remote work, so they're really not happy. Aubrey still emails me workout videos and diet plans, and when I forward them to HR their response is, "Noted. Do you know when you're coming back to the office?" I've been thinking about escalating this to corporate with an employment lawyer. Is that overkill? I'm still in a sensitive place after my surgery, and I have no energy for this, especially since Aubrey is fixated on weight loss, which was the primary way doctors gassed me for years. I've been with this company for 5 years, and I'm just exhausted and disappointed in how they're handling this, and I want it over yesterday. Update 1. All I have to say for this update is hold on to your banana pants. I saw a lot of comments asking where management was in all this, so I'll address that first. My boss, George, was getting ready to retire while this was going on. George is roughly my grandfather's age, so this entire situation bewildered both him and his replacement, who he was training at the time. Both of them met with Aubrey's boss, because believe me, I was documenting everything she did from the jump, and they all assured me that Aubrey would be dealt with. None of them recommended the red flag mediation. That was HR's idea. I was given details of the meeting where Aubrey ranted about me, and it was horrible, but apparently Aubrey was asked to leave by her own boss while several other employees told her to stop. So managerially and in the office in general, people were trying to rein her in from many different angles. HR is where the ball dropped, and dropped hard. This company just has a poor HR structure and bad entry to mid-level HR. When Aubrey's boss referred her to HR regarding her negative behavior, HR took it upon themselves to consider it a mediation situation, which, remember, at our company can go against your bonus for the year. Despite communication from George, his replacement, and Aubrey's boss saying I wasn't in the wrong. When George found out about this, he spoke to the HR generalist manager, who said that my absence probably caused a lot of strain and extra work for Aubrey, when Aubrey's not even credentialed to do what I do. Management made a point to tell me how baffled and upset they were with HR's handling of the situation every time something came up. My company mentor was also a huge support during this time until she decided to take another job elsewhere. When my doctor extended my ADA work from home accommodation a second time, HR responded by telling me my attendance was a concern. I emailed their boss's boss, the HR director, and asked for clarification. He said I hadn't come into the office, so of course my attendance was a problem. I reiterated I had medical documentation stating that if WFH wasn't available then they could refer to the FMLA documentation my medical team also sent. He replied that medical documentation, including both FMLA and ADA reasonable accommodations, doesn't hold much weight with the company. That's when I got a lawyer. Aubrey as a problem kind of drifted to the background when HR started their medical documentation doesn't matter campaign. On my lawyer's recommendation, I contacted the HR executive team, which is where this whole cursed situation came to light. And I did check with my lawyer about emailing this update and they laughed and said I couldn't leave people hanging after all that. I called the chief HR officer, which for my company is going over like 5 people's heads, but I did it with George's and my new boss's blessings, who is the head of HR, and asked why my attendance was an issue when I had reasonable ADA documentation. She had no idea what I was talking about, so I filled her in on all of it, including the mediation meeting and Aubrey's harassment and the HR director, her direct report, saying medical documentation didn't hold any weight with the company. She was speechless and asked to meet with me and my lawyer as soon as possible. My lawyer hardly had to do anything during the meeting because the CHRO was horrified at everything I told her. I've never actually seen steam come out of someone's ears, but if it was physically possible it would have happened here. My lawyer didn't need to say a word but just nodded and smiled when the CHRO offered an extended paid medical leave so I could handle my recovery and said Aubrey constantly sending me fitness plans would be dealt with swiftly. I didn't hear anything out of Aubrey for a long time, but I did hear through some gossip channels that the HR staff involved in the red flag meeting threatening to write me up were let go. Aubrey wasn't fired because they believed she was misled by HR, so I understand that part even if I don't agree with it, but she was on a tight PIP for a while. Then she showed up at my house. Now we move from banana pants to full-on banana ensembles. I'm still on leave and out of the blue, Aubrey showed up at my door on a weekend with 2 other women in tow and the commenters guessed it. She's in very deep with an MLM, or maybe a cult, I can't be sure at this point. Aubrey came over to demonstrate some workout techniques and give me some diet supplement samples and discuss a career opportunity, because she was worried about my physical and professional health. She didn't make it past my mother-in-law, who has been a godsend right now. My mother-in-law made it clear where Aubrey could stick her demonstration and they left in a hurry. I notified my lawyer and the CHRO and suffice it to say, Aubrey is now a full-time wellness coach. I'm happy I went with my gut and got a lawyer because the company has changed so drastically over the last year with the toxic HR department encouraging behavior like Aubrey's and spreading false information about medical leave and time off. The company is almost unrecognizable. Also with my boss and mentor both gone, I don't know if I'm going to go back once I'm medically cleared. The company is also undergoing a restructuring right now and my department may end up distributed between other parts of the company or even other parts of the state. I have been looking at jobs and doing some resume drafting for a full-time remote position since it feels like it might be a better fit. But many thanks to the comment section and all the support. Update 2, I got an offer from a local company that's going fully remote with administration and management meeting up once a month. The salary was right, it's 90% remote, it's a good fit, so I'm happy with it. My role is HR adjacent as head of payroll. I reported to the COO and was hired by the CEO and COO. I walked into our first admin meeting and who is sitting across from me but the HR director who told me medical documentation doesn't matter and orchestrated my red flag meeting. Let's call him Bob. Bob is the interim HR director for this company. Bob looked very uncomfortable when he saw me. We went through some employee files, including several who are on maternity leave and 2 who were injured on a job site. Bob got quieter as we began reviewing medical documentation and approving paid leave. I smiled and looked him in the eye every time I asked, "And does Jill have her medical documentation?" "Great. Medical documentation holds a lot of weight. That's important stuff to have." He looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. At one point he tried to argue against someone using their PTO to provide end-of-life care for a parent when they had ample PTO. I smiled and said, "You're right, our employee support fund should cover half this time. It's a shame for them to have to lose all their PTO when they're obviously going to need it to heal and grieve over the next few months. Why don't you get me the paperwork for the support fund this afternoon? That's so generous." Everyone was happy and in agreement. He looked like he swallowed a lemon, but everyone was like, "OMG Bob, how thoughtful." He had to eat it so bad and got me the documentation an hour later. Bob can suck it. Bob is also only a contractor, so he'll be moving on soon anyway. Medically I'm doing better, and very happy to move on from where I was. Aubrey's been full on radio silence, which is perfect for me. Thanks AAM team and commenters. I suspect my husband may be the father of his best friend's children, and now one of them is showing interest in my daughter. Original post, Septed to 2024, all names are fake. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years it has bloomed into a poison flower that infects my entire psyche. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43, and so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about. That their bond was not romantic and had never been sexual. That Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together, and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've spent many a night on the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. Now Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew the paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes, they are the kindest and gentlest people. So we were able to support Amy. To get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly? That is a long story that I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years, they presented as being buddies. Like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized, but even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good. Especially if I'm right, and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen. So when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again, and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella who she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again, after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me, or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble, but it combines with a lot of other little things. There's appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children? They certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy, and, guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids. Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy. But he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world she instantly fell in love with them, but motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. Got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then when Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid, because in the last few months we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie, my eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention, but Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly, she just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you. Which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But, the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up, but I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone, or with other friends, anytime they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me, she's still just hanging out with Tom, as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, and doing God knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, that if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances, end of discussion. It can never happen. I feel powerless to stop it though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me and asked why I'm so against this when I know him very well and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him, but that won't work forever. If God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I'm wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father, and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this, they don't control where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. About a year ago, I suggested we do one of those. Just to see Luke's reaction. He was very staunchly against it, Didn't want the government to have our DNA. Kept saying ancestry tests were a scam anyway. I brought it up to Amy, and guess which one of us she agreed with? OOP on if Luke knows she knows about him and Amy. OOP. The thing is, I think he's aware that I know. Assuming it's true, and I'm not imagining things, it's kind of been an unspoken reality for a while now. Update 1. Reddit won't let me post a link, so you'll have to find the original post on my account page. Sorry for the inconvenience. I could summarize the original, but these posts are already quite long as it is, and frankly, the TLDR is in the title anyway. So here goes. First of all, wow. I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared to Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was operating with an uncertain situation and the stakes were incredibly high. I feel like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on different ways I could go about this if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test, that I had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I am regretting that, because the window to do so has essentially closed. I just felt like it would be out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against doing so, because no matter what the results were, it would make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway, and just not told anyone. Because I really, badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. Like I had no right to plant such ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first. So what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other about what happened in their own words before I could prepare my own. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid down all of my suspicions and the reasons. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children. And I didn't even list all of them in the original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past. So have Sophie, Tom and Adam. I said over and over how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past. How I had dismissed it before, but now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to pose the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line. If Luke had ever been unfaithful. If there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. Well, they reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were perfect and so very well rehearsed. I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, or at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were just acting, but I don't know. Somehow they had reasonable responses to all of the points I brought up. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I had never objected to them having alone time before. Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much? Or are things like hair color pretty basic traits to have in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had previously commended Luke for stepping up and being a father to Amy's kids since they didn't have one. Why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? Why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy appeared to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done to indicate he was unfaithful. I asked Amy more pointedly that, if not Luke, who had fathered her children? She snapped back that it was none of my business, and I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper, and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information was not a lot to ask and perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them, but Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She went on a longer tirade about how I had always acted superior to her, which I don't believe I did, though it's possible that I gave off that vibe unintentionally. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the room was still fraught with tension. I don't know, Reddit, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course, not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to say that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he did seem genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that him giving me his word that he had always been faithful was not enough for me. But he very reluctantly agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. But Amy was infuriated at the whole concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA and basically told me to fuck off for asking, several times in several variations. I pressed Luke, and honestly he was a bit useless but probably right. He tried to convince Amy but she wouldn't hear of it and he kind of shrugged to me when I pushed him for further support. Because he can't force her to get the test done, if she refuses, that's really a dead end. Trust me, it is. I looked into this quite a bit and consulted with my lawyer. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that, to do this, he'd essentially be claiming he slept with Amy and he believes her children to be his. That would be the version of events he'd be maintaining. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy. That he never cheated on me? Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd essentially have to go on record and make a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is quite certain the children aren't his and he has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So no judge is going to compel Amy to submit samples of her children's DNA. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be a factor. If both he and Amy refuse to participate in the test, it's unlikely that Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like say, one of the twins. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please just let this go and trust him, because pursuing this will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would need to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not doing that. And if he did, that would pretty much be all the proof I needed to be certain, even if I'd need more in a court case. I pestered him further about Tom and Sophie, insisted that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a talk with Tom and activate protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that in a couple of months when he turns 18, him being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges against him as I know he'd never do anything against Sophie's will, but I'm not above implying the threat. Thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA to do a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant about the idea. Like me, he viewed it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we were to do this and Amy found out, it would mean the end of our friendship with her, most likely. Things are, Luke believes, still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again. And I can see how much he wants this to happen. But, if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, I think she would hit the roof and I wouldn't entirely blame her. Though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know all of you are cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it. That was a very long conversation. But he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together. With Luke maintaining that nothing happened. I did not sleep a wink and I kept texting him for updates. So far as I can tell, Amy will cool off, but she needs a little time. Luke and I talked things over when he came back the next morning. It was an emotionally fulfilling conversation and we ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit but we've done it before and they were delighted to have us. I just really wanted our family to spend some time together away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love getting to see my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75M, and Kat, 67F. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mill from hell, but in my life that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them. To the point that when they took notice of how distant Luke and I were from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them of my anxiety that Amy and Luke were having an affair, and that Amy's children might be his. Here's where things got a little bit interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat just gave Jim this pointed look, and did a big, dramatic sigh. So it turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine and genuinely suspected over the years that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, that they had crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, simply refuses to even consider the idea. He has always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there. He maintains that Luke and Amy are like siblings, and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance on this is naive and that, even if she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that didn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister or that she viewed him as a brother. But Jim just continued to insist that this is what they are and had always been. I could tell that he and Kat have already had this conversation before, and they kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy were not actually brother and sister, so nothing was stopping them from being physical together if they felt a mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. So yes, Kat has privately wondered if Amy's children weren't fathered by Luke, which is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. Which was never something that I minded, to be clear. I also don't mind that Kat never voiced these concerns to me. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but I think the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and needed a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children, and when pressed for more information, Luke did defend me and shut down the questions, saying it wasn't their business. I don't know if Amy kept to that version of events, but my children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably still been in contact over the last 2 days. I think my kids would have kept Amy's kids in the loop on the updates, and if Amy had told them anything else significant, they would have relayed that information to my kids. After all, we know Sophie and Tom are very close. I did try and talk to Sophie about that more, but the timing was off, because Sophie rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being attributed to my fight with Amy. She maintained that she wasn't dating Tom. To what degree that's actually true, I don't know. But she was going to remain close friends with him, and while she isn't usually a disobedient child, she made it very clear that she was putting her foot down on this one. And, to be fair, I can't really justify trying to separate them or forbid them from being friends. They've known each other for years. Luke has my back on them not being allowed to date, but he wouldn't have my back on them not hanging out anymore. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I can let you guys know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not having done the secret test, even for my own peace of mind, as now I feel like I'm locked out of the only way to get definitive proof one way or the other. Relevant comments. OOP on Luke's father possible covering for him, and if his mom, Kat, suspects the same thing. OOP, Jim being in on it, did cross my mind. He's a good man, but Luke is his son. If it came to it, he'd probably support him, though I feel like he'd condemn the affair. One thing he said toward the end of the argument was that Luke is a good man and has been a good husband to me, and did Kat really think he'd see another woman? And Kat just looked at him and said, if the other woman was Amy. Then maybe. Update 2, I didn't expect to have another update so quickly. But after posting my first update, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all of the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home, to our home, last night, and this morning, I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last, before driving right past her school and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while, before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And read it, that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable. As well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room, sounds he would just as soon forget, but all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with them. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that, because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends? But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat. To force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive. So they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been, but honestly I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me, and even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Relevant comments. OOP on what she, Luke, and Amy do for their jobs. OOP, Amy runs a bar. Luke writes articles. I'm a nurse practitioner. Update 3. First, a few points to answer from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks. But now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if Luke fathered the children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or even just suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke, but it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Kat and Luke are not. Had Jim fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. While a stream of comments have called me spineless and naive, called me a sister wife, as an ex-Mormon, that hits a particular nerve. And most recently, a stream of comments have said my story is fake. Fair enough, it's the internet, but Luke is not the first scumbag husband to have two families. Several other comments have been incredibly kind and supportive, and I really appreciate that. Apologies if I haven't responded to a comment or direct message that you sent. I covered as many as I could, but I was literally getting hundreds. So I definitely missed several of them. First things first. I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has, supposedly, recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly, because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test, and, at the advice of my lawyer, I am staying out of the process. Officially, I told Sophie not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. MIL hasn't contacted me about it either. Though we have been in touch. I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Loophole City. Another bit of good news. I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house, and we always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it, and eventually the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it was like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, hat in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel but as a friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, me and Luke. We have our own family attorney who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now. But Paige is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. Luke remembers her from college and knows she went into law but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out, he's not the only one who can harbor someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of being a friend. So, on to the update. The last time I looked in Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the point Sophie and Tom began to go around claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So, when Luke was asleep, I did just that. Swiped his phone and brought it downstairs, checked recently deleted. I am glad I did, but I also wish I had not, because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent text talking about the conflict between her and me, with Amy describing me as a problem, and Luke trying to pacify her. Without defending me at all, to be clear. They both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation and the fact that it was deleted was sketchy, nothing was actually admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher, to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages got a bit more flirty. Then, I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Amy had sent Luke a topless pic. A selfie with no shirt or bra. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true. I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. Doesn't help that Amy's always had bigger breasts than me. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, and others. Amy topless, Amy naked, in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these she was naked. In some, they both were. There were videos. Amy sent Luke a video message of herself topless, and I had to actually hear her voice talking to him in a tone that made me sick, about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video, she called him her boo, and, hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. Stopped looking at that point, I'd seen enough. For about 5 minutes anyway, then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage and... yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read Luke mention our children. There were countless naked topless selfies of Amy. Selfies of them together. Videos where Amy appeared to be masturbating. There were sex tapes, of the two of them. Tom had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Amy's room, but fuck, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. There were so many. Going back years. Not all of it was even sexual. There were some photos of Amy's kids too. One video was of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, and Luke and Amy's voices from behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers, I snapped. All these years, I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know that no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment I wanted to act, so I did. I called my lawyer, who is a remarkable woman. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, and she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me that she'd already had it ready since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. My lawyer, let's call her Paige, arrived, and I went outside to greet her in the car. Spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that, before I passed her Luke's phone and his laptop, with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft. So I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside, and then, I packed up Luke's things while the house slept. At one point Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but did not wake. I got all of his things packed into trash bags and I loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me. So he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was about when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. Tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me and that there had never been anything with Amy. Kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of shit, I didn't tell him what I'd seen, I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go. Stated firmly that our children were his too and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was where I very coldly presented the paperwork reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued a while longer, but in the end he decided to be the bigger person, and keep the peace. At that moment I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. Bought a little time. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain to the extent that I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and that I had discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I did not specify what kind of evidence and she did not ask. I woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. That I wasn't sure where, but from now on things were going to be different. Louise was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a very big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige warned me against doing that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed since she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked me point blank if it was about Amy. If Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that's an answer on its own. Got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that all was accomplished, and she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I just shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start to come home from school before long and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I was not having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still just in absolute pain and despair for what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he obviously didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. Talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently Luke did show up to his parents' house, which was a surprise, as I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat as much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Kat already shared his version with me, that he relayed to her and Jim. That I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that is all. And what's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story when talking to me, he left Amy out of it when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that. She believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong but is clearly stressed out. That when her children ask, she makes the same sort of claims. That I am having some kind of emotional, nervous breakdown, and pushing her away, as well as Luke. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair, but still puts it all on me. Amy has not reached out to talk to me directly, and I have not tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't really told my kids anything, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, though I was very clear that it is not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Sophie continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Tom continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress that all of this is causing on the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart. But it was never my life. Update 4. In my last post, there were a number of criticisms toward Paige. You guys will like this update as it turns out, you weren't the only ones who had a problem with her. As far as the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute hook, line and sinker, but Paige is convinced that between that and my having been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could be interpreted as a common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. People also questioned whether I should still be posting these, but so long as it's all anonymous, I am in the clear. Doesn't even matter if someone who knows me could figure out I posted this. I didn't use any real names, or reveal my location, or anything like that. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable, but technically I gave permission and she was only doing what I could have easily done on my own. I just really didn't want to go through all of that content. As far as the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after the very first time I contacted her. My serving them to Luke was ceremonial. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who has always been on call to represent me and Luke during our marriage. He helped us out of a jam with the HOA a while back. I'll call him Zach. Now, contrary to some of the comments' suggestions, I cannot just go around town consulting with every lawyer in the area, with the explicit purpose of locking my husband out of hiring them. That is bad faith and judges don't look too kindly on it. However, this was Zach. He had been my attorney, and Luke's, for years. I feel like I had just as much right to him as Luke did. And I got there first. So I was able to nail down our family's lawyer. Met with both him and Paige, and boy howdy, do they not like each other. Zach brought up some of the same problems as some of my comments. He argued that Paige's activity was in the gray area and urged me to hire him to represent me in the divorce instead. That caused a bit of conflict as Paige is explicitly a family attorney and this is her specialization. So I'm going to be consulting both of them from here on out. Zach actually thinks it's a good thing that I made these posts as they can't really do much other than prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I am doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I intend to look into family therapy as well. When my kids ask me what's going on, I simply tell them that their father and I are having adult problems and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for about a day. Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did, asking if Dad had cheated on me with Amy. Obviously they've been talking about this, and perhaps they have been for longer than I had anticipated. Perhaps they've been wondering. Again, even though I had absolute proof, I was hesitant to tell them as much, and let me explain why. I naturally wouldn't tell them about the pornographic content I found. I would simply say that I found messages between Luke and Amy revealing their affair. But, with the exception of Sophie, they wouldn't be satisfied with that. I already know Carter, curious little sweetheart that he is, would want to see these messages. So instead, when I was asked directly by my kids if their dad had cheated on me, I simply said I believe he did, yes. With as much sincerity as I could muster. I think they believe me. Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop, and from what I can gather, there's doubt among Amy's children as well, that this is about me losing my mind, and not about their mother being too close to my husband. I think it's slowly sinking in for poor Jim that what he didn't want to believe was possible is very much possible, and it's happening. I haven't shown him or Kat any letters or anything. They're hosting Luke, so I haven't had much of any contact with them at all. But I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well. That was nice. In the background, I could hear shouting, and though Kat quickly went outside, I did hear what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. He doesn't usually shout, he's the calmest man I've ever met, so in a way I'm worried about him but also relieved that the wool is being pulled off of his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out that I had poached Zach though. Which gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's a surprise. According to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies, here is definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too. But I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results weren't faulty and if we shouldn't take another test to be absolutely certain, but I'm not really worried about that. More confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think and I don't either. I obviously now know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake. Who if not Luke is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence. In general, everything was quiet for a few days, until it wasn't. Until she finally showed her face. My best friend Amy. I am so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere, as you are about to understand. Sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch, and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out, she and Luke know, or suspect, that I procured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business and I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No apology. No admission of guilt. Didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her, because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked her why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me even as I confronted her. She seemed like she was stressed. Panicked even. But she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations and just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad. I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself. Telling me to delete whatever I found. So I just refused. I asked her, point blank, why I should. Why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me and that I needed to just do as she said. That it was very important. So I asked again, why? And yet again, she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave. Just as I'd been afraid of, she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I'd found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This is where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop. Before I could stop her, she smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop. And sadly, Her doing this was out of frame of the camera, but it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at that moment I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave or I would call the police. She refused again, and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point I just stared at her. At the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world. And I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth. That they had the right to know where they came from. Who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family and I needed to back off. She kept going back to this idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce how I wanted and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger accelerated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well, and where it's weakest. She hurt me pretty badly, but I got her off me. That part was very much on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd try something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them, for their own safety, to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They've also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? Is she covering her own ass? As if people didn't know already. The more of my social circle I talk to, and inform of the basics, the more people are confessing that they had wondered in the past if Luke wasn't cheating on me, but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask Amy about him in particular. I don't know why you guys are so eager for these updates, but I don't mind posting them. I've never blogged about my life before. I'd imagine it feels something like this. Relevant comments. OOP on pressing charges. OOP, I included it in my report. The sound of the laptop breaking is definitely on my phone and should be on the camera as well. So far as I know, she hasn't been arrested, but I'm aiming for a restraining order now. Has Amy been arrested for assault? Send the recording of the attack. OOP, I sent word to Kat. As far as I know, Amy hasn't been arrested. Nah, that's evidence. I'm not sending it to anyone without the AOK from my lawyer. OOP on if Amy has family around or not. OOP, she's not in contact with her family and hasn't been for many years. They abused her. Luke's family became her family. She never actually admitted to having an affair, actually. I noticed that too. Brief update. Sept 18, 2024. Hey guys. It's been a rough week. A lot has happened. I don't really want to talk about all of it in detail, so I'm going to keep this short. I know I never shut up, it's just how I am, but I'm going to be much more brief this go around. Luke has a lawyer now. I don't know him. But he met with Zach and Paige. To everyone saying I should have Amy arrested, I probably could have if I'd shown the police the video. Instead, I just sent it to my lawyer. Maybe this makes me foolish, but even now, I think part of me is still trying to protect people I once loved and go easy on them. But everything's been on hold for the past few days, because Jim had a heart attack. I saw Luke and I saw Amy, and Amy's kids at the funeral. It was the first time we were all together since before all this happened. Nobody talked about what's going on, short of Amy briefly apologizing for what happened before. She did seem sincere, I'll give her that. But I wasn't about to call her out anyway. Amy, Luke and Kat all seemed pretty devastated. I was too. But we all agreed not to argue or talk about the divorce and to just let the day be a ceasefire to focus on Jim. Luke and I had a nice conversation about him. I've been spending time with my kids and taking a couple of days off work. I have enough of them on the back burner. Luke also saw the kids, twice, before and after the funeral, with me present. It went well. At my direction, and Sophie's, they didn't mention Amy, and Luke didn't try anything funny with any of them. I think he does miss them and hate that he can't see them, thanks to all this. The kids are also pretty upset about losing Grandpa, on top of not being able to see Dad as much as before. I don't think any of them blame me, but that's far from the point, frankly. Carter slept in my bed the last 3 nights. I'll get more into this in the future when I have the energy to talk about what's going on in more detail. But whoever suggested that Kat lied about the test results was correct. She never sent them in. She confessed as much to me. I guess she didn't feel comfortable going behind her son's back. But did feel comfortable lying to me to protect him. Until she didn't, until she felt guilty, and she came clean. Under the circumstances, I am not angry with her, but I know better than to trust her anymore. As far as I know, she did not tell Luke about the test, but it means Tom could still be Luke's son. Probably is. My lawyers finished going through Luke and Amy's letters with a finer tooth comb. The bottom line is, they definitely found what it was that Amy didn't want me to see, and I now completely understand why she was so panicked. It has to do with why Amy and Luke didn't marry conventionally. They did something very bad. But this is genuinely something that I'm not sure I should be talking about. Even on an anonymous internet post. I haven't even been able to collect my feelings about what Amy and Luke have done, especially with everything else going on, so I don't know if I should be more explicit. I'm sorry, I know that's not what anyone wanted to hear, but please try to understand. Paige agreed with me, that when in doubt, don't post it. I've told my lawyers to put a pin in it for now because I'm in no fit state to figure out how to proceed with it or if I should use it against them. I'm just feeling like shit, honestly. It's difficult not to blame myself for Jim. I can only imagine Luke and Amy are blaming themselves too. I know they're bad people. I don't forgive them. But this tore them apart as it did me, and I think all three of us feel like the divorce stressed Jim out to the point where it may have contributed. He already had heart disease. And in particular, I blame myself for showing him what I showed him. I showed him proof of the affair shortly before he died. I'll be carrying that with me for a very long time, even if I shouldn't. I'll update again whenever I do. I'm sorry, I'll respond to comments as I can. From being kicked out at 14 for bad grades to building a six-figure business, my journey of overcoming adversity. I am a 27-year-old boy, and my parents kicked me out of the house because I received poor grades. Yes, you heard that correctly. Despite having lived in the United States for 2 generations, my parents have learned little from American parenting techniques. They have become preoccupied with my school grades, believing that good marks are the only way to live a successful life. To make matters worse, my older sister has always been an excellent student, resulting in continuous comparisons at home and at school. Things were considerably better in elementary school. My sister finished with an A+ and topped her class, whereas I only received an A, which sparked my parents' dismay. In middle school, the comparison game started. Following each exam, my parents would compare my grades to those of my sister from the previous year. The more they compared, the lower my grades became. My grades plummeted from A's to B's and C's, and my parents' rage increased with each drop. They attempted every type of punishment except physical torture. I was forced to kneel for hours without food or water, and I was starved the night before examinations to help me concentrate. A month before exams, they took away my video games, locked me up at home, and forbade me from going outdoors or eating any of my favorite meals. Whenever I requested something, they said, "Get good grades and you'll get it." I eventually stopped asking for anything. My parents own a modest grocery store and hail from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. My grandparents were immigrants who worked several jobs to make ends meet. My father had to leave school at a young age to support his family. My parents worked hard in their teens and 20s to save money and start the store. They believed that education was the only path out of poverty, despite the fact that we were not as impoverished as they claimed. It's the standard save for a rainy day attitude while hungry in the present. While I respect their efforts, they overdid it. They didn't realize that school grades weren't everything. Torturing me at such a young age was a recipe for disaster. I tried so hard to match my sister's grades, but I couldn't. I struggled at memorizing, unlike my sister, but I excelled at calculations. As their punishments became harsher, I grew more rebellious. I began skipping courses and adding jokes and song lyrics on my exam papers to irritate them. They grounded me, putting me in the basement with my books and not letting me go until I finished my lessons. I was not permitted to play outside on weekends or vacations, and my video games and comic books were taken. But I was a bright kid. When my parents went to work at the grocery store, I would sneak away and play for the entire day. When they learned I was sneaking away, they started taking me to the store on weekends and throughout summer vacations as punishment. However, this backfired, as I began to like it. I enjoyed talking with clients, assisting them in making product selections and managing the cash register. My folks were not delighted. They did not want me to run the grocery business, they wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer. Anything less was considered a dishonor to the family. One day, I casually said that I wanted to be a salesperson because I was good at closing deals. My folks were horrified. They believed that only ignorant people work in sales. Because they were spending so much money on my schooling, I was expected to pursue a respectable career, such as becoming a doctor or engineer. This tension persisted until I tested their limits by receiving a F in my freshman year of high school. My parents were devastated when they learned I would have to redo a year. They were finished with their customary punishments and reacted as if I had committed a crime. They had no choice but to hit me, but they refrained. Instead, they exposed me to severe verbal abuse and psychological suffering. They claimed I had brought dishonor on the family and could no longer live with them. They tossed me out of the house and commanded me not to return, even if I died from starvation or cold. I was devastated. Despite my rebellious inclination, I had never envisioned running away from home, and I was unprepared for this predicament. My parents didn't allow me to mingle much, so I had few friends to turn to for assistance. I was either confined at home or sent to the grocery store to help out. However, once my initial dread of living on the streets subsided, I experienced a startling sense of freedom. It was a huge relief to finally be able to accomplish what I wanted. My first night, I slept on a park bench. The next day, I headed downtown looking for a sales position. I knew I had an aptitude for selling, so I went from store to store, asking if there were any openings. After applying at over a dozen businesses, I got a position at a beauty shop. It wasn't simple because I lacked qualifications and prior experience, but the owner required someone immediately. He challenged me to sell a costly lipstick as an add-on to a customer who only wanted night cream. I managed to sell it and the owner saw my potential. He was impressed by my ability to sell makeup to young women and employed me. The salary was poor, but he did offer me a place to sleep. As my sales increased, I requested a commission on each sale, and it was the beginning of my path to become a successful businesswoman. Ironically, my parents thought forcing me to work at their grocery shop was punishment, but it actually provided me with valuable real-world experience that would benefit me later in life. I wish they had recognized my potential and understood that practical experience is far more valuable than memorizing academic material. Following that, I bounced about jobs in search of higher salary. One business even offered to cover my college expenses, but I declined. I had something else in mind. At the age of 21, I founded my own company, which offers support and sales services to other small enterprises. My company closes deals for other product-based businesses, generating cash in exchange for large fees. We sell a wide range of things, including credit cards, insurance, cosmetics, and books. It did not expand immediately. It took over 5 years to stabilize. I began with simply 5 staff working for a single client, who sold mattresses and pillows. My organization now has 200 sales agents that assist over 50 companies in selling thousands of products. That's enough backstory. Here's the current issue. My mother has been monitoring me online. She recently began following me on Facebook and Instagram. My accounts are public, and she has been liking older posts and photos. I'm not sure if she's trying to draw attention to herself or if she's simply making mistakes while zooming in on my photographs. One thing is certain, they are fascinated by my lifestyle. They used to think I was a loser who couldn't do anything without decent marks, but today I earn 6 figures every month. My mother texted me a week ago, saying she missed me and wanted me to come home. I saw the message but did not reply. She has been pouring me with compliments about how proud she is of my accomplishments. She's now bugging me to come over. Regardless of how much I disregard her messages, I can't stop thinking about them and my childhood trauma. Part of me wants to go home and brag about my success in front of them, to let them feel the embarrassment they caused me. However, my partner believes that I should avoid them. And don't get caught in their emotional net. She believes they will eventually use guilt to extort money from me. What do you all think I should do? Update 1. Hello everyone? This is going to be hilarious. Despite my girlfriend's warnings not to meet my parents, a part of me wanted to brag about my accomplishment, so I went to their door. Dad wasn't home, but my mother and sister were waiting for me. Dad is still unaware of my achievement. He believes I'm generating money by scamming others and does not want to be affiliated with me. Mom apologized and said that I had to suffer because of Dad's old-school notions that good grades were the key to life. It was funny how she made Dad the scapegoat, despite the fact that she was also complicit in abusing me. I pointed out that she was really stricter in punishing me, but she dismissed it, claiming she was simply following Dad's directions as a good wife. When I tried to hold her accountable, she smiled and claimed it was all in the past, and we should go on and reconnect as a happy family. I inquired about my sister's life. She informed me that she has a master's degree in literature but is having difficulty finding work as a teacher due to poor communication and social skills. Despite knowing the cause for her terrible people skills, I pretended to be intrigued and asked her why her high academics weren't helping her get a job. She blamed our parents, claiming that she had spent her entire childhood confined in a room studying to impress them. She pushed herself to the limit and separated herself from everyone. I knew how lonely she was at school. She had few friends since mom wouldn't let her mingle. Mom believed that white kids were terrible students and negative influences. Despite her hard work, my sister's lack of social skills is now limiting her professional prospects. Seeing her situation, I'm pleased I rebelled. Else, I'd have ended up like her. My parents attempted to isolate me as well, but I resisted. My sister joined me in condemning mom's terrible parenting. Mom began sobbing and, once again, expertly deflected the blame to dad. After we finished blaming her for our horrible childhood, I asked her why she had contacted me. She went on and on about how proud she was of my accomplishments, despite the fact that she had no idea what I did for a job. As I've previously stated, Asian parents define success as being a doctor, engineer, or having a high-paying position at a bank. They don't comprehend entrepreneurship. To them, running any business is the same as running a grocery store, which they despise. Sitting in that house reminded me of my upbringing, when my parents warned me I'd wind up on the streets as a loser. They even misled me into believing I was mentally ill since I couldn't get A+ grades. Oh, and I failed to mention that they sent me to a therapist because they believed I was having trouble focusing on my academics. After 2 or 3 sessions, the therapist chastised my parents for putting too much pressure on me, claiming I was a perfectly normal child with an average IQ for my age. My girlfriend bet that mom invited me to ask for money. She lost the bet, and mom did not ask for any money this time. However, her behavior indicates that the request will arrive shortly. Since then, mom has been continually checking in on me. My girlfriend wagers $1 that whenever she receives a text, it will be about money. LOL, I've won every bet thus far because mom hasn't inquired, but I suspect I'll lose soon. Mom has invited me to dinner this weekend. I understand she's attempting to present a rosy picture before asking for things. I just got a text from her saying she's arranging supper for me this weekend. I'll provide an update in my future post. I have to rush immediately. Goodbye. Update 2, hello everyone, I got my sweet revenge on my folks. I don't think they'll ever call me again after this humiliation. In my last piece, I noted mom's text invitation to supper. I said I was busy and couldn't make it. Yes, I was playing hard to get. Since she insisted, I questioned her why she was being so nice to me since dad still suspected I was making money illegally. She stated that dad was organizing the dinner as a way to make amends. She said dad was proud of me and wanted to apologize in person. I inquired, what do you mean by organizing? It's only the 4 of us, correct? She responded, no, we're inviting all the close friends and relatives living nearby. I answered, sure, I'll be there. I couldn't pass up this opportunity to confront my childhood pain. Mom asked me to dress nicely and arrive on time. My rebellious side kicked in. I arrived 2 hours late, dressed in my gym sweatshirt, trekking shorts, and cap. For an Asian parent, wearing shorts to a social gathering is equivalent to committing a crime. Mom called me repeatedly, but I didn't answer. I just texted a couple of times that I'd be late, with no reason or explanation. I'm sure that annoyed my folks. They have a habit of portraying themselves as excellent hosts. When guests came to our house, my parents would spend at least 2 days cleaning every area, making a list of foods to offer, and arranging everything in its proper place. Guests would be served on our finest china, and if they stayed, they'd sleep on the softest sheets and pillows. My parents would argue that it is part of our tradition to treat guests properly, but some of it was excessive for social acceptance. My parents had reserved seating on the restaurant's rooftop. When I came in such casual dress, I received quite a few stares. Because I make more than everybody else there, those looks were disguised with phony smiles of gratitude. My parents were obviously upset, but they did not show it. Instead, they hugged me and raised a toast, singing my praises. This was the first time dad had held me and it did not seem comforting. I felt resentful. The way they acted made me wonder whether I was the jerk for believing they were incorrect all along. But they were imposters. The hall was crowded and for a while, I pondered discreetly eating dinner and leaving. But when they proceeded to tout my accomplishments as their own, I became outraged. They boasted about my accomplishments, belongings, and lifestyle, taking full credit for molding me into a good person. My outspoken aunt then questioned, "Didn't you guys throw him out of the house?" I laughed and applauded her bravery. My parents were embarrassed, but they soon covered it up, saying it was a way to bring me on the right track. And that their penalties were what helped me achieve in life. I lost it when they stated that. I sarcastically replied, "That's correct, everyone. I attribute my whole success to my poisonous parents. Do you know what the best decision they ever made for me was? I was kicked out of my house and forced to live on the streets." Yes, it is correct. You're so cocky today, stating you knew I'd be successful. It's funny because I recall another version. Didn't you say I would be a loser? A homeless drug addict? Worse, a criminal? I went on. Remember how you restrict me of family vacations as punishment for my grades? How did you lock me up at home for a week with little food? You confined me in the basement for hours without sufficient ventilation and ordered that I finish my education there. Yeah, you're correct. All of this was absolutely necessary to make me a better person. Perhaps everyone in this room should do the same for their child to help them succeed. You see, this is the secret sauce of success, you understand? It was such a monologue. I would say that the bitterness and pain that had been building up inside me for years had finally erupted. My mother tried to intervene, but I dismissed her and resumed my rant. My sister tried to calm me down by caressing my arms, but I was beyond their control. My parents were in tears, and they would have rather died than be embarrassed in front of the entire village. But I was less concerned about their reputation. Standing next to me, my sister was crying as well. Some of you may ask why I have a soft place for my sister since she has never stood up for me as an elder sibling. Well, I do not blame her. She was the same age as me, but a year older. My parents caused more harm to her than to me. At the very least, I was able to rebel, sneak out to play and finally build a better life for myself. She, on the other hand, lost her spine by following our parents' orders. She never got to enjoy her childhood, and she now struggles with low confidence while living with them. I've offered her a position with my company, and she's even taken personality development seminars, but it hasn't helped much. I offered she start working for me to gain some soft skills, and then she could choose a job for herself. As for my parents, I have severed all connections with them. I warned Mom not to contact me again, and that I was just speaking to her to exact revenge for everything they had put me through. I've blocked her, but I plan to stay in touch with my sister. My sister patted me on the back for exposing our parents, saying it was the best vengeance I could have gotten. They don't care about money or anything else but their reputation as perfect parents in the neighborhood. Following the event, various family members and friends reached out to express their condolences for my troubles. I told them I was not searching for pity. I just wanted people to recognize that pressing a child for academics is more harmful than beneficial. My sister and I are living proof of poor parenting. Caught my pregnant wife on camera cuddling with a coworker. Now I'm questioning everything, including paternity. My wife, 38F, and I, 39M, have been together for 12 years. I don't know how to characterize it other than as the perfect connection. In 12 years, I believe we've only raised our voices at each other perhaps 2 or 3 times. We do everything together, but we've never had a problem letting each other live our own lives and pursue our own interests. We bought a house where we wanted, and we both had fantastic high-paying jobs with excellent work-life balance. Basically, it's been everything but perfect. We've been trying to become pregnant for 2 years and haven't been successful. We were preparing to begin fertility treatments when I returned home from a business trip, and guess what? She was pregnant. I got this strange notion. Wait, I thought we didn't try during the week last month because of fertility testing. But I couldn't remember exactly since we were so busy. So I assumed I had misremembered. Now, I frequently travel across the country for work. Other than during COVID, I've been on the road for up to 40 weeks per year. Since COVID, it has been reduced, but still more than a week every month for the past 4 to 5 years. My wife has become quite friendly with the guy she works with. Let us call him Matt. Matt is slightly younger, around 34 million. I know him. He is married, and I know his wife. They've been working together for around 7 years. He's always been around, and we've been friendly. Have I ever suspected something was going on? No. But I've always thought you'd be a fool to believe there's no chance your partner may leave the relationship. Maybe I'm naive, but I've always considered it as a safety not to take my wife, or any previous companion, for granted. She has never given me cause to believe she would do that, but anything is conceivable. I was out of state for work about a month ago, while she remained at home. I asked her what she had been doing earlier in the day and she replied Matt was coming over for supper. This wasn't unusual. Matt stops by on occasion. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes alone, and occasionally when I'm not around. I didn't think much about it. We installed a security system with cameras inside and outside the house following an unrelated event a few years back. The cameras record footage, which she and I can view live. I frequently use those cameras to check on the dog while I, or both of us are away, because the rest of the system is monitored by a business in case an alert goes out. She knows I check those cams. There's even an installed system that allows me to communicate with them. If any of us is out of town, I'll play pranks on them, and she will do the same. She travels for work, although far less than I do. The point is, it's known that I check them frequently when I'm not at home. So I switch on the camera and see my 4-month pregnant wife sleeping on her side on the floor, with Matt sitting on her leg and massaging her hips with a foam roller. Okay, what the __ is this? I begin rewinding through the footage and they are eating and talking regularly. But then they get on the couch and share the same blanket. They are now feet to feet, but that couch isn't that huge. Then they move to the floor, and I logged in. Anyway, I text her while I'm still monitoring the cameras. They both appear like deer in headlights, and he swiftly departs. We get into an argument. She isn't angry with me for accusing her, but she is adamant that nothing happened, or ever will happen, and that what I witnessed was innocent. She complained about being in agony from the pregnancy, which I know is real. She is already experiencing back pain and other symptoms. The most significant moment of the conversation was when I questioned her, if I were there, would you two have been comfortable doing any of that in front of me? She hesitantly said, no, probably not. I told her I didn't want to talk after that, but we'd discuss it when I returned home in 3 days. That's when it occurred to me. What if my strange gut feeling about her telling me she was finally pregnant was related to this? What if my 1% chance came true and we did not have this child? It's now eating away at me while I spend 3 days alone in a motel 1,000 miles away. I resolved with myself that I believe it is less likely than more likely that something between them occurred, but my 1% has now increased to 10%, 20%, or possibly more. When I arrive home, she's walking on eggshells and doesn't say it. I wait to see what she will do. 2 days later, she finally brings it up and collapses. She claims nothing happened and that she would never cheat. She doesn't go beyond to prove her innocence, which I viewed as a positive sign. Anyway, we resolve the issue and continue forward, at least for the time being. I'm still coping and figuring out how to trust her after all this time. I'm gradually realizing that they've been pals for a long time. Maybe he has intentions, but I don't think she does. I've spent a lot of time with both of them and have never noticed anything wrong. What is destroying me right now is the concept that if I am wrong and something happens, I will be able to deal with it. What if the child is not mine? I've never mentioned it in our disputes or the few lengthy discussions we've had about the problem, and she hasn't either. Mostly because I don't want to further the situation by crushing her, especially if she's telling the truth, which I mostly believe. The only option I can think of at this point is to wait until the baby is delivered and then order a paternity test in secret. Should I do this? Should I tell her and deal with the situation now? If you were a woman in her circumstances and told the truth, would it ruin you or your opinion of me? If I asked you if you were lying, how would you respond? I don't want to ask such a vague question, but what should I do? Mini update. There are a lot of comments. Thank you everyone. More than I can handle directly, but I'll continue reading. Some have made valid comments about tackling it now rather than later, which I am contemplating more than previously. Thank you to those that concentrated solely on my relationship. I understand, but that is not my main focus right now. We've been discussing it a lot. My wife and I are fairly open with each other. I'm not saying I believe nothing happened, but I'm more concerned with paternity right now. If I need to track or spy on my wife using Life 360, then this relationship is gone. That is not the connection we have, nor is it one that I want or believe anyone should have. We are working to rebuild trust. As I said in this lengthy essay, my 1% suspicion increased to 10% or so. Trust me, I take my relationship seriously, but if the child isn't mine, there's no use in continuing the talk. I have previously addressed this with my lawyer. I don't live in a state where the birth certificate issue would be a problem. If I have documentation proving the child is not mine, divorce will be less of an issue. We are both in independent financial situations, so it will not matter much. I'll keep updating this page as long as possible and offer an update when and if anything is fixed. Update 1, May 10, 2024. She was out of the state on a work trip until late last night. It is Friday, and she is working from home in our kitchen today. I asked to speak and brought it up, requesting a paternity test. She quickly responded yes, without hesitation. She stated unequivocally that she has no reason to be concerned. She has no trouble taking the test right now. The one condition I left was that if it is at all intrusive, according to our doctors, I am fine with waiting till it is low risk. I'm not a doctor, and I have no idea what they'd have to do to test now, so we'll see. But she is aware, and we are receiving one. It was a decent and lengthy talk. We're currently sitting together for lunch. She has no idea I did this on here, therefore the new account because she is on here somewhere. Thanks to everybody for your assistance and opinions. A lot of you reminded me that we are already very open about everything, and if nothing happened, she wouldn't be concerned about getting a test. I was more concerned about her health and adding an absurd level of stress if there was a problem, given she is in a high-risk pregnancy and it has taken us so long to become pregnant. So again, thank you for your assistance. I suppose I could update whether the child is mine or not, but I'm not sure how long it will take. I am 90 to 95% certain the baby is mine, but this will help us continue the conversation. Update 2. Because it appears to be a more relevant topic in this post than in the other, I do have the film. No, I have not spoken to Matt yet. He's informed her he wants to discuss it, but I've ordered them to wait. My relationship with my wife, as well as the paternity test, are currently the most important things. I will ultimately speak with Matt. No, I am not going to purposefully entangle Matt's wife. I don't see why I would, except to be vindictive. I won't cover for him, of course, but his relationship is his, and mine is mine. I'm not interested in making things worse. Whatever happens between him and his wife is none of my business. We've had a lengthy discussion about why my wife believed she could be intimate with someone else. Nothing is being neglected. I could write an essay about our history, her motivations, and my thoughts about it, but instead I'll simply state that I'm aware of it. She denies any more wrongdoing, but concedes it was not a good appearance. She was not thinking about it at the moment, and that is what we are currently dealing with. When asked if it appeared harmless and if my wife visited Matt's house when his wife was not present, I said that she was 4 months pregnant and I was at home. We've been so busy with work that the days have blended together. Trust me, we are quite open people who are at ease with themselves and one other. I'm not sure if she's been to his place without his wife. I mean, the 3 or 4 of us maybe only hang around once or twice a month, but they work directly together every day and have for years. So, obviously there is some closeness there. They are both in senior executive positions at their organization. I too have long-term female friends with whom I have traveled, had dinner, and hung out in hotel rooms, but I have never crossed any lines since it is not who I am. I'm married, and I adore my wife and life. I see no reason to do anything inappropriate. So yeah, the optics are awful, but I need to determine whether it's just lousy optics or anything else. Matt may have motives, but I'm not sure. That's the thing I need to figure out, if I trust her to handle it. She claims she has never been aware of Matt's intentions. She spends almost the same amount of time with him and his wife as he does with us. She works in a building nearby, while I reside on the coast while my company is headquartered in Chicago, so my coworker buddies are considerably more dispersed. We can't simply grab after-work beverages as others can. Because of this, I frequently attend her work hangouts rather than my own. I'm also acquainted with her CEO, so while it's not ideal, I've always trusted her. I've never had a reason not to, until now. This is the first fracture or ding in our 15-year-old trust. To clarify what happened that day, my wife said something to Matt, who froze. He murmured something I didn't hear and she added, "No, don't worry about it." He put something in the dishwasher and she let him out the front door. He did not jump out the window or anything. I'm not going to include every single nuance or detail in this post because it would take hours to write, and I'm not uploading security tape for strangers to see. I installed the security system after an event involving a stranger on the internet. I'm not suggesting nothing transpired between them, rather I'm not sure. That is what my wife and I talk about practically every day, and what we are going through. The original point of this post was that we had not discussed paternity. I didn't want to place her in a situation where she would lose the child, whether mine or not. Not only was I unable to describe every delicate detail, but I also included incorrect details about our life that had nothing to do with what happened. I used to be a minor public figure and some internet troll came across the country to threaten us with death. It grew to the point where the federal government had to intervene. People here are jumping to conclusions with far less knowledge than I do, and they are ignoring the original premise of the post and the questions I posed. Some inquired if I had informed Matt's wife. No, I have not. She is my wife's friend, but we don't spend much time together. I know her through my wife and I only see her every few months, at a bar after work or when they come over for dinner or to hang out. We are not best buddies. Should I actually go tell her, "Hey, your husband was at my place"? I knew he was there because I observed him apply a foam roller to my wife's hips while sitting on her feet. It's pretty apparent there, ___, and I'm not sure, but she might be carrying his baby. This is not a soap opera. I have nothing to tell her, so why would she believe me based on the scant facts I have? And why or how does that help my situation? If all of this is incorrect, then I've ruined my relationship by acting like a child and inciting drama for what appears to be vindictive reasons. Plus, I would place them in the same scenario as we are now, for something I don't even know is true. I believe you have completely lost the plot here. Update 3, August 21st, 2024. Hello everyone, here's your next update. I also included this in the recent update. This is where we are at. Yes, my wife is still extremely pregnant. She is at the hard to pick things up off the floor stage. She's due in 8 weeks, but it's actually 6 weeks. I simply looked at the calendar. We are currently having weekly ultrasounds. The youngster already weighs approximately 5 pounds and has a large head. Her and I had very lengthy, direct chats about everything. She is convinced that nothing has ever happened and never will. For a long time, she was furious with herself for triggering this and my doubts. I've done my best to correct this, because I need to keep the stress off her as much as possible right now. But it will definitely be reviewed after the birth. As I've stated throughout, my only concern is the child and the successful birth. Okay, mostly. Perhaps not only asterisk. The only thing we still disagree on is that I believe he was getting too close because he had developed feelings or was receiving attention that he wasn't getting elsewhere. She doesn't see it that way, but she has admitted that it is feasible, even if she was unaware of it. When I told her I wanted a paternity test, she readily consented, stating it was no problem at all. My only caveat was that it not be medically risky or stressful, as she is in a high-risk pregnancy. We both discussed it with our doctors, and they basically told us that our only option was to go to court since they wouldn't do one without the law involved, which we both thought was crazy. Her doctor was confused by it, so I didn't press too hard. To be honest, she pretty much demanded the test. I knew there were other alternatives, and I researched them, but I ultimately decided to wait until the birth. I already have a lab set up and ready for the test. I'm 95% confident it's unneeded, but I'm getting one for my own peace of mind and, most importantly, to ensure that nothing comes between me and my child. Thank you to everyone who has sent me supportive messages that I have not responded to. I'm going to go through them tonight before I leave again. For those of you who believe I should be acting like a 17-year-old high school student, either by being aggressive or purposefully cheating on my wife to illustrate a point, or implying other childish behavior, thank you for the entertainment. Stop watching TLC or TikTok. That idiotic drama isn't the way to go, kids. And to the one individual who recommended I provoke an accident with my wife, I hope you wind yourself in prison someday. It's quite unlikely that I'll return here after tonight, at least until I receive the test findings. If you're still interested in the results, check back in 1.5 to 2 months. I've been advised that the findings take roughly 48 hours after submission. I'll give you your moment then. Am I the asshole for refusing to move my wedding to accommodate my brother's travel schedule? Now, everyone is furious with me. Living alone, I'm a 28-year-old lady with a regular 9 to 5 job. After almost 4 years together, Erin, my fiancé and I have been engaged for around 1 year. We are at last organizing our wedding, something I have been dreaming about. I have given every tiny detail great care. For the past 4 months I have been tirelessly trying to make sure everything is flawless. We expected all of our loved ones to be there, so we selected the date, issued invites. That was the intended course of action regardless. Brandon and Daisy, my parents, make for an intriguing team. My 58-year-old dad works for a building company. He has always been the quiet, follow-through kind. Daisy, my mother, 55, has stayed at home for as long as I can recall. They have always harbored a particular fondness for my 32-year-old older brother, Fred. Actually, soft spot could be understated. Certainly their favorite, he is the golden child if you will. Fred is somewhat a bit of a character. Though I'll say he's usually ambitious, none of his commercial endeavors ever really turn out. He seems to live in a fantasy world where his next great invention would at last make him wealthy, having had several failed businesses. Married to Alice, 30, he has 2 children, 3-year Jenna and 5-year Ethan. Although I personally have nothing against them, it is no secret they live much over their means. My parents are always rescuing them. It has come to the point where it is expected. While I have always had to fend for myself, Fred and his family effectively live off the support of my parents. Though I knew there would be some drama, especially with Fred's concerns, I couldn't wait to inform my family when Erin proposed. Still, I tried to be upbeat. I recall the day we announced our participation. Just close family and friends, we had a little gathering at our residence. Sharing the news made me very eager, And for a split second it felt as though perhaps my parents would be delighted for me rather than only focused on Fred. Naturally though, Fred and Alice took the front stage. Just midway through our announcement, Fred began discussing his plans to open a new company and his desire to move to a larger house. The entire dialogue turned from our involvement to Fred's most recent ideas. Though it was aggravating, to put it mildly, I did not want to create a scene. I simply let my pride slide after swallowing it. Aaron observed though, and later that evening he told me he was glad of my handling of it. That was quite meaningful to me. Choosing the day was still another challenge. 4 months ahead we chose a date so that everyone had plenty of time to arrange. Before deciding on it, I even followed up with my parents to see whether they were conflict-free. No trouble, they promised me they would be there. Although I should have known better, I thought that marked the end of it. I went all out in the particulars. We selected flowers, a lovely location, and the ideal outfit. Everything was lining up and I was growing increasingly enthusiastic. This was meant to be our day, a celebration of our love amid the people most important to us. Hoping it would assist to ease any possible problems, I also included Fred and Alice in the wedding party. Deeply though, I felt a storm was building. That storm struck when my parents abruptly contacted me from out of the blue with a pressing demand. It sounded bad since they had to discuss the wedding. My parents abruptly decided a few weeks ago to travel with Fred and his family. At first I puzzled myself since I assumed they were discussing a trip following the wedding. But actually, they meant the week my wedding was scheduled. Since the wedding date ran counter to their vacation schedule, they wanted to know whether I might potentially change it. I gasped. I booked everything, the venue, the caterers, and had months of planning for this wedding. I sent invites. And now, as if it were some laid-back dinner gathering, they were asking me to reschedule the date. Suddenly less significant than a last-minute trip with Fred and his family was my wedding day, the day meant to be about Aaron and me. Though I attempted to keep cool, I was enraged. Why would they want to schedule a trip right next to the wedding date we have already decided upon? The answer from my mother was, well, you know how occupied Fred's calendar is, and this was the only time they could all go together. It shocked me. Fred's trip came first for them than my wedding. I informed them there was no choice about the date. Everything was previously set, I could not have moved it merely to fit Fred's trip. Suggesting that perhaps I should at least speak with the venue and see if they could change the date, my dad tried to be a peacemaker. But I closed that right away. The date was decided upon and that was definitive. My mother became irate and declared I was being irrational when I insisted on a different date. She continued on how family should come first, and how my rigidity was making things tough for everyone. She even charged me with trying to sour their friendship with Fred and his family. Though I stood my ground, that truly stung. I informed them I was not going to reschedule the date. If they missed it, that was on them. For a minute they were quiet. Then my mother remarked they would have to think about it. They hung up, not even bidding farewell. It still amazed me that my own parents, on vacation, were genuinely thinking about skipping my wedding. Furious on my behalf, Aaron advised me to try to straighten things out by calling them back. I therefore followed. Hoping for some middle ground, I phoned them, but things did not proceed as expected. I tried to convey the significance of this wedding to me, the length of time I had been arranging it, and how painful it was that they were even recommending I change the date. Still, they were tenacious. My dad kept stating that Fred's family had already booked everything, fully ignoring the fact that I had booked everything in advance too. My mom kept suggesting that I was being irrational. Changing my schedule would be equally as difficult for me. It felt like chatting to a stone wall. I realized at the time I had to include the extended relatives. I told my aunt, who I live somewhat near, the circumstances. She promised to talk to my parents. She was exactly as startled as I was. Maybe hearing it from someone else will help them to recognize how foolish they were acting. My parents doubled down instead of backing off though. Beginning to present me as the irrational one, they began phoning other family members. They claimed I was not compromising and causing problems for everyone. They even made hints suggesting I was envious of Fred and sought to punish him by postponing the wedding date. Though some of the family began to support me, stating I should be more accommodating of Fred's family, it was total stupidity. They were obviously attempting to get me to cave in. I was not going to let them prevail. They were trying to compel me to modify the date by means of shame and family pressure. I was about to let them wreck it just to please Fred. I had every right to have my wedding on the day I had selected. I thus informed them that the date was set. Should they be unable to make it, that would be their choice. But that was final. I was not going to alter it. So Reddit, am I the jerk for not adjusting the wedding date in response to the vacation of their golden child? I am very appreciative of everyone who took the time to reply. After publishing my experience here, I got an incredible amount of support and guidance. Reviewing the comments, many individuals speculated that there could be more to my parents' abrupt trip plans than they were disclosing. It started me to consider, thus I chose to dig some. I began by chatting once more with my aunt, who has always seemed to me as essentially a second mother. She was not surprised by what was happening as she knew how my parents are with Fred. She became quite quiet though, when I mentioned the vacation. A moment later she said she had heard Fred was once more experiencing some major financial difficulties. His most recent commercial endeavor apparently failed, and he owed money. Though not enough, my folks had started supporting him once more. Desperate, Fred was seeking for a means to keep his head above water. As it happens, the trip was really a cover tale. Though not for a laid-back vacation, my parents were intending to send Fred and his family to Europe. They were scheduled to meet some possible backers Fred had located abroad. Before Fred lost everything, the entire trip was a last-ditch attempt to find someone to commit to his company. Their financial position was depending on this trip to save Fred, hence they were quite determined to travel. When I learned, I became enraged. It was about my parents once more putting Fred above everything else, including my wedding, not only about the vacation. They were ready to skip my big day in order to try to save Fred from another problem he had created. Knowing the facts, I understood I had to face Fred. I inquired whether we might meet when I phoned him. I didn't want to allow him time to get ready for any excuse, thus I didn't inform him what it was about. I came right to the point when we got together. I assured him I understood his financial problems, the trip, the investors. He initially tried to play it off, claiming it was merely a business opportunity that happened to line up the wedding date, but I was not buying it. Defensively, he stated I didn't know how much pressure he was under. How he was trying everything he could to support his family. I reminded him that our parents had been rescuing him for years. This was not the first time he had fallen into a financial hole. Fred said at last that things were terrible. His company was close to bankruptcy, hence he would lose everything should this investor transaction fall short. But he sought to guilt-trip me rather than own responsibility. As his sister, he advised me to want to assist him in whatever capacity, even if that meant changing the date of my wedding. He charged me with being egotistical and unconcerned about his family. That was the final straw. I informed him that although I had supported him as much as I could over the years, I would not be sacrificing my wedding day for his bad choices. I made it plain that I was not going to modify the date. If he couldn't be there, that was his option. I went away leaving him seated there. Following the confrontation with Fred, I chose to get in touch with Alice. I wanted to hear her side of the tale since I wasn't sure how much she knew about things. She seemed tense as soon as we sat down when we met for coffee. She most likely understood I was not there to discuss wedding preparations. I asked her straightforwardly about her knowledge of Fred's predicament and the European trip. She said she knew the financial problems but lacked all the specifics. Though Fred had withheld a lot of it from her to guard her, she knew things were horrible. She appeared startled when I told her the true motivation for the vacation. She was unaware that my parents intended to try to find investors for Fred's company during the trip. Alice said she had been concerned about Fred's spending patterns for some time, but every time she brought it up he would dismiss her. She also said she was disappointed about missing the wedding, but Fred had persuaded her this trip was absolutely essential for their futures. When I told her how much this was affecting me and how it was seriously dividing the family, she seemed really offended. Alice clearly seemed to be in a difficult position. She wanted to help her husband, but she also wanted to avoid being the cause my parents missed my wedding. I wasn't holding my breath when she promised to speak with Fred and try to find another way to handle things. If only Fred is stubborn. Knowing that Alice wasn't totally on board with this strategy made me feel a bit better, but I also realized that ultimately Fred was probably going to act any way he felt was best for him, regardless of how it affected the rest of us. Given everything that had transpired, I came to see that gathering the entire family and laying everything out on the table was the only way to fix this. Though I wasn't sure how it would turn out, I knew that it would only become worse if we avoided confronting this squarely. I thus convened a family conference. We needed to talk, I told Fred, Alice and my parents. No apologies, no delays. We chose to get together at my folks' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room, and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I described how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it and how heartbroken I was that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then took out the proof I had collected, copies of emails and messages between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred accused me of attempting to ruin his life and said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. But I still had to finish. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me, how much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I'd collected, copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I had collected, copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since the conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update: my parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. She then informed me they had decided to postpone their European vacation. After all, they planned to be at the wedding. Surprised, I had readied myself for the worst since I knew Fred would be chosen once more. It was such relief to hear them select my wedding over the trip. Next, my dad answered on the phone to validate what my mother had said. He said he will be there for me on my big day and apologies for not acting sooner. He also said they needed to rethink how they had been managing things as they were beginning to see how much Fred's problems will impact the family. Though it was a start, it was not precisely the sincere apologies I had been expecting for. Most important was that they were traveling to the wedding. I appreciated their choice and our call concluded on an unexpectedly upbeat note. It felt for the first time in a long time, like perhaps things might improve between us. My parents started canceling the Europe trip right away after the decision was made. As you could expect, Fred's reaction to them telling him the trip was canceled was not great. Fred was irate. Almost right away, he called to ask what I had said to our parents to cause them to postpone the trip. I told him I had just told them the truth, that their participation at my wedding meant more to me than anything else and that they had to decide what was more vital. Fred said I was trying to harm his prospects of turning his company around, therefore accusing me of influencing them. He even implied that, driven by jealousy, I was trying to ruin his life. Though it was the same old song and dance I had heard from him a million times before, this time I resisted letting it get to me. I gently informed him that our parents had decided upon their own course and that I had nothing to do with his difficulties. He could be furious with someone, not with me, if he wanted to be angry with someone. Fred then hung up on me and I didn't hear from him for some time. Though I was concerned about how this would impact the wedding day, I was also glad my parents were at last seeing the whole picture. They had decided to be by my side, and that was a positive direction. Over the next several days, my parents began to examine their connection with Fred and me closely. Several times my mother checked in with me and during one of those calls she admitted that she and my dad had been discussing their treatment of us growing up a lot. She said they had always considered Fred as the one who required more help and attention due to his problems, but in doing so they had neglected my needs and taken my freedom for granted. She told me they were starting to understand how much they had harmed me over the years by always putting Fred first. Apparently, my dad brought it up saying they should constantly support Aaron and me rather than only during difficult times. This would help us. Though it was not a 180, it was the first time I had ever heard them freely admit their bias. They committed themselves to treat both of their children equally and to be more present in my life. Though I was unsure of how much of it would really stick, it was a lot to absorb. They were real, and it gave me hope that maybe going forward our relationship may become better. Regarding Fred, he remained enraged, but my parents were resolved not to let that control their behavior anymore. They were beginning to realize that continually rescuing him was not benefiting anyone. Not him, not them, and most certainly not our family as a whole. I never would have imagined hearing them suggesting they would start imposing some limitations on him. Fred obviously did not lie down for any of this. He intensified his efforts to pull my parents back on his side when he understood they were serious about calling off the vacation and attending the wedding. He began threatening our parents in all kinds of ways, including maybe suing them should they not follow through with the trip. He said he would have to sue them for breach of contract, should they fail to assist him with his business. They had pledged to help him. Though I believe Fred knew deep down, it was really an empty threat, and it highlighted his extreme need for their acceptance. Not one of my parents backed down. They advised him that their choice was definite and he had to work out his own issues without depending much on them. For them, this was a significant step, and even if it was difficult for them to challenge Fred, they knew it was essential. Fred continued from there though. He began trying to get other family members on his side by corresponding with them. Claiming that I had coerced our parents into postponing the trip in order to undermine him, he presented me as the villain. With some relatives following Fred's story, it created some conflict inside the extended family. Most of them saw through it and backed my parents' choice to give my wedding top priority. Fred tried his best, but his strategies for manipulation were less successful than they had been. People seemed at last seeing him for who he truly was, a person who was always seeking a handout instead of owning his own mistakes. All of this drama clearly creates a gulf inside the family. Certain of our relatives are firmly on Fred's side, thinking that our parents ought to have honored their word to support him no matter what. Viewed as the spoiled younger sister exploiting her wedding to create distance between the family, they perceive me. Others, particularly those who have seen how Fred's actions have impacted my parents over the years, support their choice to go to the wedding and begin enforcing limits with him. These days, family get-togethers are more contentious and individuals are silently siding. Those who believe I'm in the wrong will judge me. I try not to let that affect me. Aaron has been fantastic in keeping me focused on the positives. That is, that our wedding preparations are still underway and that my parents will be here to assist us. Not easy, but is it? I worry about how this would impact our family over time. Will this divide ever close or will it keep widening till it is too great to span? I know I have to be steadfast in my decisions even though I have no solutions. Especially when it involves compromising my own happiness, I cannot keep stopping backwards to fit everyone else. About Fred, I have no idea what his future holds. He is still looking for a means to salvage his company. Without our parents' financial support, it will be difficult. Aaron and I are concentrating on our wedding and the life we are creating together in the interim. Although the path has been difficult, I hope the changes my family is undergoing will result in a better, more balanced relationship for all of us down the road. Update. Though all the drama preceded the wedding, I wanted this day to be flawless. The day of the wedding eventually arrived. Aaron and I had worked so hard to make it unique, I simply wanted everything to go without incident. Nancy, my maid of honor, who has been my best friend since college, kept reminding me that today was about Aaron and me and that nothing else counted. At the site, a lovely garden estate, Aaron and I had fallen in love with the moment we first laid eyes on it. We were ready. Though I had not spoken to Fred since our previous chat, I knew my folks were on their way. Not sure whether he would show up or not, and the idea of a possible confrontation was weighing on me. The wedding was lovely, and I felt as luckiest person on earth as we exchanged our vows. Looking over at my parents in the front row, I saw my mum cleaning away tears. That was a little but important moment that gave me hope that perhaps we were headed in the correct direction after all. The ceremony itself lived out all I had hoped for. We kept it private, with just close family and friends, and the officiant did a fantastic job of making it seem heartfelt and personal. We snapped pictures in the yard following the ceremony. The setting was really lovely, the light was perfect. While things were still a little awkward, my parents joined us for some family photographs and it was obvious they were really delighted for us. They were trying, and it meant a lot to me. The welcome speeches were moving when it came time. My dad even shocked me with a moving toast in which he apologized for the recent conflict and said he was really pleased of the woman I'd grown to know. For him, it was a significant step and seemed like a fresh start even though it did not wipe out all that had transpired. Fred and Alice arrived just when I believed the day was running without any problems. They hadn't RSVP'd, so I wasn't sure whether they would show at all. They entered the midst of the reception and momentarily the place went quiet. Fred seemed to be carrying proof. He initially went up to our parents, had a little whispered talk with them and then moved over to Aaron and myself. Alice held back, clearly uneasy. Fred congratulated us when he got here, but he was obviously not really here to rejoice. He was there to make a point. Right in the middle of our wedding reception, he wanted to strike up a discussion on his company problems. Even on my wedding day, he seemed unable to tolerate not being the focal point of attention. Aaron moved in before I could speak. Fred was gently reminded by him that today was about celebrating our marriage and that this was not the time or place for business. Fred did not find it appealing. Aaron was not having it as he tried to protest. Fred gave up and turned away finally, but harm was done. I made every effort to ignore it and savor the remainder of the night. We danced, cut the cake and hung about with our loved ones. Though Fred tried to create drama, the evening closed on a good note. Officially, I married the love of my life. Nothing Fred did could take that away from me. Regarding Fred, his life has veered somewhat differently. My parents faced a tough choice following the wedding. They agreed to stop contributing financially. They came to see that continuously rescuing him was not doing him any good and that it was time for him to pay for his mistakes. Fred's company soon closed without our parents' assistance. He looked for additional investors, but those offers dropped through without the trip to Europe. He eventually had to start bankruptcy filings. He had trouble swallowing this harsh pill, hence his pride suffered greatly. At last Alice, who had been mounting annoyance with Fred's financial irresponsibility, reached her breaking point. She picked the children and left him, moving in with her parents as she worked out her future moves. Fred is learning to live alone and must start over in his life. Although I enjoy his demise less, I do believe this is the wake-up call he required. Perhaps now he will begin to take charge of his own life instead of depending on others to resolve issues. Only time will let us know. For Aaron and me, at last we can concentrate on our future free from all the familial strife. We intend to shortly start a family. We had to postpone our European honeymoon as well since all the wedding drama interfered. It seems like the ideal approach to honor our entering into this new phase of life. I want to pause to thank everyone on Reddit for their guidance and encouragement along this insane trip. Your statements gave me the will to defend myself and make some difficult decisions I might have otherwise backed off from. Though it wasn't simple, I'm rather happy I stayed with my guns. Cousin falsely accused me of sexual assault, family cut me off. Now she's dying, admitted the truth, but they still want me to stay silent. Let's call her Jade. My cousin wrongfully accused me of sexual assault, when I was 18. Sadly, my family thought her narrative true. 4 years older than me, Jade and I were close growing up, but finally we drifted away. She is the daughter of my uncle, who was a single father, younger brother of Mom. After his ex-wife became pregnant, my uncle married young. Unfortunately, she cheated on him, and their marriage broke up a few years later. She tried to keep in touch with Jade for a few years, but finally moved away with her new partner and they never got back in touch. Respectable man, my uncle always battled obstacles on his own and refused assistance. After his divorce, he never sought another major relationship. He devoted his life to parenting Jade. He even built a college fund for Jade, but after she turned 18 he told her that although he had done all in his ability to help her, she was now on her own financially as he had to consider his retirement. Although Jade disagreed, I thought that was reasonable. If she wanted to keep on her studies, she should pay for them herself. Many arguments between her and her father resulted from her believing he should support her studies for as long as she desired. Jade thus visited my family a lot of times. She would come over to rant to my mom following every disagreement with her father. Although I personally felt my uncle was reasonable, I kept my thoughts to myself as Jade would visit to speak with my mother and not me. As she usually did, Jade came up to our house one day without warning. I was the only one in the house. My parents were away. Expecting her to go, I'd told Jade that my mother decided to stay in the living room since she needed some time away from her father following another dispute. To be honest, I wasn't interested in hearing it again as she used to vent quite loudly to my mother and I had heard enough about her battles with her father. Jade began venting to me since my mother was not here. Though I had rather different ideas on the topic, I could see she expected me to be as empathetic as my mother. I cut her off when she once more started grumbling about her father. Although my mother might have agreed with her points of view, I felt my uncle was acting rather sensibly. He had spent his whole life raising her to be a competent and capable independent lady, I told her. Now it was her chance to show him right. If she truly wanted to pursue a master's degree or perhaps a doctorate, she would have to do what everyone else does and pay for it herself. She majored in STEM, hence I knew that whatever job she finally landed would be sufficient to cover her expenses. She had just to at least try. She insisted though, that she couldn't work and study at the same time and that she would find it too much to manage. I advised her maybe she should give up on further study if she already decided it was difficult for her to work while she was still in school. It was unjust to demand her father keep paying for everything, especially after he had already done so much for her, and she was treating him like the villain instead of being appreciative, I said. She quite obviously hadn't anticipated that reality check. She started screaming at me and calling me a vile human being as soon as I said all of this. She said I was a pampered brat who didn't deserve the support I received, hence I would never be able to relate what she was experiencing. Though I stayed quiet, to be honest I felt she was more of a pampered brat than I was. She screamed at me for a few minutes then fled the house sobbing. I avoided her since, as I mentioned, I had no interest in hearing her grievances over and over again. The sequence of events surprised me as well. My whole life collapsed the next day when she accused me of One accusation turned everything around. After 3 years of quiet from my family, folks are at last learning she had lied. My parents woke me early the day after Jade and I argued, stating that my uncle and Jade were here to visit me, and it was reportedly rather vital. I had no idea what was going on, but when I got downstairs Jade started shouting, accusing me of the night before and acting as though she was breaking down. My parents were equally startled, and my uncle seemed really worried. Jade was acting as though she were not even in a state fit for communication. Most of the speaking came from my uncle. He said that following her confrontation with him, Jade had been inconsolable when she had returned home the day before. She eventually informed him I had lured her in and carried out the conduct she was now accusing me of when my parents were not home. Not even my uncle could look at me, and my parents avoided eye contact as well. None listened when I tried to object and assert my innocence. It was appalling. People already treated me like a criminal even though I had done nothing. My parents begged my uncle for pardon right in front of me, asking him not to publicly disclose the allegation or report me. They claimed they will do all necessary to resolve the matter. Whether I cried out or not, my uncle and dad totally turned away from me. It was so annoying that I grabbed a vase and tossed it against the wall in an attempt to get their eye. That backfired regrettably. My dad lost his cool, grabbed my arm, and hauled me to my room, closing me within. There was no way I could let Jade get away with this, hence I kept hammering against the door until my hands and arms started hurting. Telling such a big lie may have destroyed my reputation. Sadly, my dad allowed me out of the room only when my uncle and Jade left. I started crying right away as he opened the door and tried to explain to them he hadn't done anything, but they informed me they had seen security footage from the cameras outside our house. Jade had come over the previous evening, they noted, and had left the house crying a few minutes later. They decided to trust her based on her tear-filled fleeing. They told me they were embarrassed of the kind of son Jade had produced and that she had no reason to lie about what had transpired. While my mother was crying and unable to even talk, my dad assured me that, with great persuasion, they had persuaded my uncle and Jade not to file lawsuits. They were obliged to pledge something in return though. To spare her from seeing me and revisiting the horrific event, Jade and my uncle insisted that I be taken far away. After much debate, my dad decided to send me to live with my great uncle somewhere far from the family. With his bad attitude and anger problems, this great uncle was the least liked family member. Though he said it was the only fix, my dad knew I hated him. Not only was I being sent away, but they also told Jade that to keep things quiet, they were going to take my college fund and give it to her. I tried to complain, but there was no communication with them. Finally, I gave up as I no longer saw the need. Not even my own folks trusted me. Since her own father would never accept financial help from anyone, including his own family, I understood that Jade had most likely accused me unjustly only to control my parents and extract money out of them. After that episode, a few days later I was ready to go and packed. Neither my parents bothered to say goodbye or give me a hug. They kept me under house arrest by posing as I wasn't even at home for the following few days. My phone was taken away and I was not let said farewell to any of my friends. They cautioned me that they would destroy my life personally should I fail to get off the grid and vanish from everyone's lives. A falsehood Jade had uttered drove me to distance from everything I knew and cut relationships with everyone from my past. My great uncle showed in a few days following that to pick me up, and I was sent off to live with him in what felt like an exile. Not one person from my past has contacted me since then, not even my friends or family. I had to totally start again in my life. It was quite challenging to fit in with my great uncle when I initially moved in. Throughout the day he taunted me nonstop even though he had no idea why I had been sent out. Though he had no idea why I had been sent out, he would harass me nonstop during the day. He would hold it against me and tease me about it based just on my being kicked out. I had to walk on eggshells around him as he had a bad attitude and rage problems as I've noted. Though I knew my parents were paying him money every month, he still acted as though he was doing me a great favor by allowing me to stay with him. After the first few weeks, I understood there was no use to weep over lost milk. I knew I couldn't live with him indefinitely. My parents had cut me off and forbade me from interacting with anybody from my former life. I resolved to start looking for work as all I could do was maximize the circumstances. Not even could I go to college. I had been let into the college of my choice, but I lacked the resources to pay for attendance. Following several weeks of moping about and a few interviews, I at last landed a job as a warehouse worker. Although the work paid little and was physically demanding, at least with my first pay I could leave the house owned by my great uncle. I had the good fortune to have a few colleagues around my age who were likewise having financial difficulties. The three of us decided to chip in and share an apartment and grew close friends. I knew my great uncle would consider it a good riddance, so I didn't even bother telling him when I moved out of his house. Never heard from any of my family members once I moved out. I have been living with the same folks I found my first apartment with for the past 3 years. Every one of us has been quite fortunate. After a few months of working in the warehouse, all three of us resolved to keep searching for better prospects as the work was quite physically demanding. We all aspire to eventually go to college, hence throughout the past 3 years we have switched jobs and worked to save some money. I'm making a good salary currently working in sales. I have been considering applying once more to universities. My two buddies are doing great as well. We recently moved into a larger apartment in a far better area. Naturally, my family believes it's the ideal time to attempt and come back into my life now that things are beginning to show promise for me. I was pretty taken aback when my dad contacted me by email a few days ago since, as I indicated, I hadn't spoken with them in 3 years. Since it was one of the rules my parents made when they kicked me out and I had been anxious about them disseminating the truth and tarnishing my name, I am not active on social media. I so stayed to the guidelines. Though they never tried to get in touch with me, my email address has not changed in 3 years and I never banned them anywhere. Reading the email, it was essentially an apology for all that had transpired over the preceding 3 years. To enable his correct outreach to me, my dad required my address and contact details. In case I wished to get in touch on my own time, he also included his personal contact details. Jade had at last chosen to disclose the truth about what actually transpired, thus his apology and the abrupt attempt at reconciliation sprang from it. She was dying and, I suppose, had at last acquired a conscience or something. She informed her father the truth for whatever reason, and he talked with my parents. My parents chose to get back in touch with me once they knew the truth. Regarding Jade, her pancreatic cancer diagnosis makes it quite improbable she will survive. She has been suffering for the past 8 months. Her health is just getting worse even with continuous medication. Ironically, she couldn't even make decent use of the money from my education fund. She squatted all the money on bad life decisions after screwing me off. She chose to take a gap year with all that money and tour the globe to expand her horizons and find herself instead of working toward her master's degree. Wanting to live luxuriously, she had already spent more than half of her savings when she returned roughly 1.5 years earlier. She came back with very little left and began pestering my parents for more. If she stole any more money from my parents though, my uncle threatened to cut her off. She thus gave up on the concept of schooling since she lacked enough money left to afford a master's degree without working and since working was something she refused to do. She still had some money left, but she kept her careless way of life instead of using it sensibly or trying to increase capital. She was already somewhat spoiled and lethargic from her year-long holiday. Despite not even seeking a job, she ultimately wasted more money purchasing an apartment and living above her means. She landed a job around a year ago, but she had to quit shortly after learning she had cancer. She now needs the money, hence she has to sell her flat and all else she purchased. Although I don't want to come across as callous, after learning what had happened to her I couldn't help but feel some gratification. She was her own worst enemy, so she had no enemies. After I closed the email from my dad, I had to consider whether or not I wanted to contact my parents again. I decided to talk to my friends about it, which also meant I at last had to tell them the truth about why my parents had kicked me out. I had simply informed them that we argued. Up until then, I had not disclosed the actual cause. Email later, I at last opened it to my buddies. I told them everything about Jade, how she had lied and thrown me under the bus, and how my parents had thought her over me. They not only drove me to live with the worst relatives conceivable but also had me cut everyone from my past off and threatened to destroy my reputation should I go against them. The truth I was imparting to my companions hardly seemed possible. They urged me not to contact my parents after I was done. They claimed they wouldn't pardon my parents either, if they were in my place. Since these are my closest friends and at this time they are essentially the only ones I have, I pay great attention to their advice. It's not only that they advised me to let go and avoid running across my parents again. They also advised me to talk about what happened to me. Though I did nothing illegal, I have been living in anxiety for the past 3 years. They are right, my parents choose to believe someone lied about me, hence I had to give up so much of my life. I have to talk if I want to take back my life. I told my parents I intended to reveal the actual account of events before I went public. People have a right to know the truth. So it makes no difference whether Jade is lying on deathbed. She destroyed my life. Today it is my chance to recover it. I thus texted the number my dad had supplied me and informed him exactly what I was going to do. The screenshots of the email my dad sent me already proved Jade had been lying. I could thus post the truth on social media immediately. Forget about just blogging, I may at last have social media once more. Though I suppose he misinterpreted the circumstances, I wasn't asking my dad for approval. Now he and my mother, together with my uncle, are blowing my phone and asking me not to do this. They contend that Jade has already gone through a lot, is suffering more than she has ever done, and has gotten her karma. They say I need not discipline her going forward. They are requesting me not to reveal the facts in public since it will damage Jade's reputation. Without saying why I left in the first place, they seem to believe I can come back into their life and resume what I left behind. In a sense, they are correct, no one will probably challenge it. Though I could, I do not think I want to. Jade stole a great portion of my life, and even my friends find it quite reasonable for me to share the truth. It is about people knowing what actually happened, not about exacting revenge against her. Besides, there are few logical reasons for missing 3 years from everyone's life and then showing up again without a word. I'm happy enough here, so I don't even intend to return to the city. Yet I do miss some of my relatives and friends who treated me well. They should, at least, be entitled to know the truth. The only thing keeping me from posting is the constant calls and texts from my parents and uncle. They almost have been begging me not to go public. Jade seems to be in quite poor form. What then would happen if I went ahead and revealed to my cousin, even if she is on deathbed, the truth of why I had to leave everything behind for 3 years? Update 1. I finished it, lads. I considered it for a long time, repeatedly asked friends, and they all advised the same thing. Though I hadn't done anything, Jade and her family had taken away 3 years of my life that I could have spent properly, and I had to live in fear because of them. Whether or not Jade is in condition, it would be quite legitimate for me to exact retribution. Many of the responses on this reflected the same viewpoint. Ultimately, it was my choice at the finish. Knowing most people would support me helped me to feel much better. My first post was a week ago, and last night I finally posted a narrative of everything that has transpired in my life together with an explanation for my 3-year absence from the net. Friends, relatives, everyone who knew me, have contracted out to let me know they are here for me and have sorely missed me. I trust them, as I had several communications from folks over the first few months after I vanished. Apparently, my parents advised everyone not to search for me after that, saying I wanted to be left alone since I had gone through something horrific and needed time and space to recover. People thus stopped trying to get in after the first few months, believing they were honoring my choices. My friends informed me they had repeatedly asked my parents where I was, but my parents never told them, so they couldn't get in touch with me. Even many of my family claimed to have waited patiently for me to come back. Seeing how ready everyone was to welcome me back and how none had forgotten me made me somewhat cry. Most importantly, people have claimed that they always regarded Jade to be shady. Nonetheless, what she did was low, even by her standards. My mom and uncle haven't said anything thus far. I hope they stay out of it, as I truly don't want to talk to them. Regarding myself, having all of this off my mind makes me feel a lot more free. Speaking up about what happened was wise. I have no regrets about anything. Update 2. I posted it some few days ago, and yesterday my folks got in touch with me. Having only asked one thing, that I let sleeping dogs lie, they informed me they were quite let down in me. They wanted me to come up with a reason for my 3-year absence, but not tell everyone the truth about what happened, since they think Jade deserves peace and quiet in her present state. After my post, apparently, Jade has lost almost all of her friends, and even family members are no longer eager to talk to her. They seem to be blaming me. It's startling that they still provide more concern for what Jade is going through than for their own son's experiences. I told them I no longer bothered about their displeasure. An apology will never be sufficient. They let me down on several levels, and today they have no right to demand anything from me. I could say the same thing about myself if they believe Jade should have peace and quiet only because she is cancer-ridden. I was just 18 when they booted me out and forced me to live with my nasty great uncle. They showed no pity or forgiveness for me. I at least am speaking the truth. Jade lies, and she got away for 3 years. I'm going to take back my life now, and I'm not going to let anyone attempt and cause me shame about it. I advise them not to get in touch with me ever again, and that their only cause of disappointment should be themselves. Then I finally blocked them. Something I should have done long ago, but I was confused and afraid. Speaking up about what has occurred to me, though, has helped me to find closure, and today I am not under pressure to deal with my parents. For all I care, they and their expectations can go for a hike. Update 3. Hey, after 3 hard years this weekend, I finally chose to see my friends and relatives. It turned out to be rather the finest choice I have ever taken. Along with me, more for moral support than anything else, were my housemates. To be honest, they have gotten so close that we are now like brothers, and I wanted them to see my buddies too. Everyone has been getting along fantastic. My buddies were happy to see me. Since they all were outraged when I mentioned I was planning to stay in a hotel, I am actually living with one of them right now. Though I'm returning in a few days, my heart is simply so happy that I cannot even put it into words. We are spending our time of life living together in one of my friends' residences among my roommates and old buddies. I have also visited quite a few of my relatives, who have informed me they have cut off my mom, uncle, and Jade. They never intend to be involved with them ever once more. At the end of the day, people will always stand for what is right, which makes me rather glad. Having individuals around who love me more than my parents ever did makes me happy, as they did not forget me. My mill threatened court if I didn't give custody of my daughter to my sister-in-law, accusing me of being an irresponsible parent. I, 35, am a single father to my 3-year-old daughter, Lily. My wife Sarah died 2 years ago from cancer. It was a sad loss for both me and Lily, but we've been working hard to move on and build a happy life together. My mother-in-law, Karen, 58F, recently approached me with a stunning request. She requested that I transfer custody of Lily to Sarah's younger sister, Emily, 30F, and her husband John, 32M. Karen reasoned that Lily required a proper family with a mother figure, and Emily and John were better qualified to raise her. This request caught me completely off guard. Lily is my daughter, and since Sarah died, I've done everything I can to provide her with a loving and secure environment. I've altered my work schedule to be more present, hired a part-time babysitter to assist when I'm at work, and ensured Lily has lots of playdates and activities to keep her engaged and happy. When I denied Karen's plea, saying that I had no intention of relinquishing custody of my own child, she became upset. She accused me of being selfish and not considering what was best for Lily. I attempted to remain cool and maintain that I was fully capable of raising my daughter, but Karen refused to listen. Karen threatened to take me to court, which inflamed the situation. She claimed to have evidence that I was an inadequate parent and that she would use it to obtain custody of Lily for Emily and John. Her threats astonished and wounded me, especially since I've always attempted to have a positive connection with Sarah's family for Lily's sake. I asked Karen what kind of evidence she allegedly possessed, but she declined to elaborate. She just kept saying that Lily would be better off with Emily and John, and that I was robbing her of the opportunity for a regular family life. I held firm and assured Karen that I would resist any attempts to take Lily away from me. I informed her that I was Lily's legal guardian and that her assertions were baseless. I also mentioned how uprooting Lily from her home and separating her from her father would be extremely difficult for her. Karen stormed out of my house, claiming that I would hear from her lawyer shortly. I was left feeling angry, hurt, and concerned about what would happen next. Since then, I've documented all of my interactions with Karen and kept meticulous records of Lily's care. I've also contacted a family lawyer to evaluate my choices and prepare for any possible legal battle. I'm convinced that keeping Lily with me is the right decision, but Karen's accusations and threats have unsettled me. I can't help but wonder if I'm selfish for not taking her suggestion more seriously. Emily has been battling with infertility owing to hormonal difficulties. She and John had been trying for a child for several years with no success. I sympathize with their position, but I don't think it justifies taking Lily from me. For Lily's sake, I tried to stick to our regular pattern during the next few days. I took her to the park, told her bedtime tales, and did my best to keep her away from the conflict with her grandmother. However, I couldn't stop feeling anxious, wondering when the other shoe might drop. A week after Karen's first visit, I received a formal letter from a lawyer representing her. The letter made a number of charges against me, including neglect and emotional abuse. I was accused of working too much and abandoning Lily with strangers, alluding to her nanny, who has been with us for over a year, who Lily adores. The letter also implied that I was emotionally unstable as a result of my sadness over Sarah's death and incapable of providing a supportive environment for Lily. Reading these claims felt like a punch in the stomach. Since Sarah's death, I have dedicated my entire life to ensuring Lily's happiness and well-being. My efforts were distorted and used against me, which was both infuriating and devastating. I immediately phoned my attorney and forwarded the letter to her. She informed me that the allegations were unfounded and that we had a good case to keep custody. She suggested I get character references from Lily's pediatrician, preschool instructors, and other family members who could attest to my parenting skills. As I started reaching out to people for recommendations, I was overwhelmed by the response. Lily's teachers applauded her development and social abilities, pointing out how well-adjusted she appeared despite the loss of her mother. Our pediatrician praised Lily's health and my parenting skills. Even Sarah's relatives and aunts expressed their support, stating that they disagreed with Karen's behavior. Despite the outpouring of sympathy, I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. Karen has been a part of our lives since Lily's birth. She had helped us during Sarah's illness and after her death. I'd always assumed we had a decent connection, even if it was occasionally strained by our shared sadness. It felt like she was tearing away what was left of our family. I tried to grasp Karen's point of view. Perhaps she truly believed that Lily would be better off with Emily and John. Perhaps she was dealing with her own grief and wanted to keep a bit of Sarah close by raising Lily with her other daughter. But no matter how I looked at it, I couldn't rationalize her conduct or the harsh charges she leveled against me. Update 1. Emily and John arrived unannounced at my home yesterday. I was astonished to see them, especially after Emily's previous conversation, in which she apologized for her mother's actions. Lily was napping, So I welcomed them in for a peaceful conversation. Emily began the conversation by stating that they thought it would be best for Lily to live with them. John nodded, appearing uncomfortable but supportive of his wife. I listened patiently and tried to remain cool. When Emily had done, I gently but firmly voiced my position. I explained that while I appreciated their concern, Lily was my kid, and I had no intention of giving up custody. I highlighted Lily's happiness and well-being, and that uprooting her would be terrible. Emily's conduct abruptly changed. Her expression hardened as she accused me of being selfish. She claimed I was damaging Lily's life by denying her motherly care. I was shocked. Emily then accused me of preparing to marry another woman and make her Lily's stepmother, which startled me. This was totally bogus. I hadn't considered dating since Sarah's death, let alone remarry. Emily became even more upset after I denied this. In a bizarre moment, Emily accused me of never actually loving Sarah or Lily. She added that if I truly cared about Lily's well-being, I would let her grow up with a real family. Her remarks were so scathing that they stunned me into stillness. As I struggled to react, John attempted to calm Emily down, but she dismissed him. She jumped up abruptly and announced that they would be meeting with their lawyer again. Emily said they will fight for custody and that I should be ready to lose Lily. They swiftly left after that, leaving me reeling from the experience. I sat quietly for a long time, trying to understand what had just transpired. After I'd collected myself, I called my lawyer to inform her of this new situation. She urged me to chronicle the visit and Emily's threats, assuring me that they had no legal basis to take Lily away from me. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, I hugged her a little closer than normal. I told her and myself that I'd do everything in my power to protect our small family. The path ahead might be challenging, but I was ready to tackle whatever hurdles came our way. Now I'm left wondering how things got to this point. How did a once supportive family become so fractured? And most crucially, how can I protect Lily from the impending storm while also keeping her bonds with her extended family? Update 2. 2 days after Emily and John's visit, Elizabeth, Sarah's grandma, called me. She's always been the family's voice of reason, so hearing from her was reassuring. However, what she told me astonished and infuriated me. Elizabeth told me she overheard a chat between Karen and Emily. It found out that their sudden interest in obtaining custody of Lily was motivated by more than just relatives or providing a mother figure. There was a considerable financial incentive. Sarah inherited a large quantity of money from her late grandfather. Sarah and I had chosen to place all of the money in a trust fund for Lily's future. Lily could lawfully access the money once she reached 25. Elizabeth added that Karen and Emily assumed that if they got custody of Lily, they would also gain control of her inheritance. They regarded it as a means to alleviate Emily's financial problems and afford costly fertility procedures. I was infuriated. The concept of using Lily as a pawn in their attempt to obtain money that properly belonged to her was beyond comprehension. It explained their abrupt behavior shift and the lengths they were willing to take to obtain custody. I called my lawyer right away after hanging up the phone with Elizabeth. I explained the issue and sought counsel on how to protect Lily and her inheritance. My lawyer instructed me to follow these steps. 1. Document Elizabeth's statement. She suggested that I approach Elizabeth for a written statement about what she overheard. 2. Examine the trust documents. We needed to guarantee that the trust was irreversible and could not be accessed or altered if custody changed. 3. Notify the trustee. My lawyer advised notifying the trustee of the probable custody issue to avoid any unlawful alterations. 4. Consider a restraining order. Given the deteriorating circumstances, she suggested that I pursue a restraining order against Karen and Emily to safeguard Lily. 5. Prepare for court. While we hoped it would not come to this, my lawyer began drafting points to deliver in court if required, with a focus on Lily's best interests and the apparent financial objectives underlying the custody dispute. I spent the next few days acquiring all of the required papers and following my lawyer's instructions. The betrayal I felt was enormous. It was devastating to think that Sarah's own mother and sister would try to manipulate Lily for financial advantage. Despite my wrath, I attempted to remain cool for Lily's sake. She had picked up on the tension and had become more clingy than normal. I spent additional time with her, assuring her of my love and dedication. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, I found myself thinking about Sarah. I wanted her to be here to assist me get through this situation, but I knew she would be proud of how I was safeguarding our kid. I made a secret pledge to her and Lily that I would do everything I could to keep our little child safe and secure. Now, as I prepare for what might be a lengthy and unpleasant court struggle, I can't help but wonder how money was able to rip this family apart so utterly. And how can I safeguard Lily, not only now, but in the future, from those who may try to exploit her? Update 3. Karen sent me a note a week after I spoke with Elizabeth and my lawyer. She desired to meet and resolve matters civilly, without using the courts. I consented, hoping it would be an opportunity to end this nightmare. We met in a neutral setting, a quiet cafe in town. Karen and Emily were already present when I arrived. They both appeared anxious, but tried to be nice. Karen began by explaining that they had changed their strategy and wanted to find a solution that worked for everyone. Emily chipped in, proposing we schedule more frequent visits and even overnight stays for Lily at their home. I listened intently as they laid forth their plan. When they were finished, I took a long breath and decided it was time to put all of the cards on the table. I know about the inheritance, I responded gently. The effect was immediate. Karen's face turned pale and Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. They exchanged anxious looks, apparently not expecting this. I went on. I understand that this isn't about Lily's well-being or her desire for a mother figure. This is about Sarah's inheritance, which is already held in trust for Lily's future. Karen attempted to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. Sarah and I established that trust together. This is for Lily's schooling and future. It is not available to anyone, including myself, until she is 25. Emily began to cry. Whether from remorse or frustration, I could not tell. Karen appeared to be about to disagree, but I pressed on. I have been patient. I've tried to understand, but exploiting my daughter as a pawn for money is unacceptable. So let me make it clear, this is the end. No more threats, no more accusations, and no more attempts to separate Lily from me. I stared them both in the eyes. If you continue like this, I will not hesitate to take legal action. I'll file for harassment, emotional anguish, and any additional charges that my lawyer recommends. I have documentation for everything, even your financial motivations. Karen's face stiffened. You can't prove anything, she asserted confidently. Are you willing to risk it? I asked. Because I am. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lily. The hush that followed was crushing. Emily was the first to shatter it. We just wanted the best for Lily, she answered faintly. No, I responded firmly. You wanted the best for yourselves. Lily is happy, healthy and adored. That is what is best for her. I rose up, prepared to depart. This is your final warning. Stop now or we will take this to court. And believe me, the outcome will not be to your liking. As I walked away I heard Karen say, you can't keep us from seeing her. I turned around for the last time. I've never wanted that. You are still Lily's family, but it is up to you to prove that you deserve to be in her life. With that, I exited the cafe. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that I had faced them, grief about how things had turned out and, most importantly, a newfound commitment to protect Lily and give her the life Sarah and I had envisioned for her. When I went home, I grabbed Lily closely, glad for her innocence throughout this. I hoped that one day, when she was older, she would realize that everything I did was out of love for her. Now I'm left wondering if I was too harsh. Should I have offered them another chance? Or was this the only way to keep Lily safe and honor Sarah's memory? Final update. It's been 6 months since my disagreement with Karen and Emily. The aftermath was difficult, but things eventually settled into a new normal. Karen and Emily backed off following our meeting. They formally apologized, admitting their mistakes and expressed regret for their acts. Although I appreciated this step, I remained wary. We've gradually restored some type of a relationship, mostly for Lily's benefit. They now have supervised visits once a month. It isn't ideal, but it's a beginning. Lily is prospering. She's happy, lively, and becoming more like Sarah every day. We talk about her mother frequently, keeping her memories alive. I created a support group for single parents who have lost their relationships. It has been healing to connect with those who understand my journey. I'm taking it one day at a time. The experience has made me more protective of Lily while also increasing my appreciation for our life together. I'm grateful for the encouragement I received and the courage I discovered to stand up for what's right. Lily's future is safe, and that is what really matters. My wife left me for her rich lover, but when he lost it all, she came crawling back asking for a second chance. I am 32 years old, and I have been married to my wife, who is 27, for over 6 years. We've been together for 8 years and 3 months and have lived together for 7 years. In my opinion, everything was always excellent. I felt like we were the ideal relationship. We both have decent careers, secure money, and purchased a home 5 years ago. In February 2022, I tragically lost my mother to a heart attack. The months that followed were extremely difficult for both myself and my wife, who was close to my mother. By harsh, I mean truly rough. We hardly went out twice throughout that time, spending most nights at home relaxing on the couch and watching TV. I wasn't happy, but I assumed we'd get through it. Then D-Day arrived 5 weeks ago. My wife went out drinking with 3 male coworkers, only 5 minutes away from our house. I was okay with it, thinking, cool, but I'm going to bed soon. Around 3:30 a.m., she arrived home with those 3 guys. I knew them all. She then informed me that she was going out with them to the city. I disliked it, but I couldn't stop her. Everything closes at 4 a.m., yet despite the 15-minute travel home, she didn't arrive until 5:30. That was when my suspicions began, despite the fact that I had never mistrusted her before. 4 weeks ago she departed for an entire Sunday, claiming she was going to a carnival with her mother. I didn't trust it but had no idea what to do. She even left without saying goodbye while I was showering. She arrived home later that day, weeping. My initial answer was, "Honey, come here. What happened? What's made you so upset?" Her first words were, "I want a divorce." Following that, we had an emotional conversation. I asked her straight up whether she had cheated and she answered no. She told me she was unhappy for a long time and wanted a divorce. She had never informed me anything was wrong with our relationship, so this really surprised me. After our conversation, she left and moved in with her mother. 4 days later, I met her again since we have a puppy that neither of us can care for on our own, especially at her mother's house, so the dog is currently staying with an aunt. When we met again, I confronted her about infidelity. This time she admitted it. She said that she had cheated on me from the night she went drinking until a week later, when she left home. She stated that she believed she was in love with him. When I asked her what she liked best about him, she simply answered, "We have a good connection, a spark." That was it, I suppose. She also stated that she was experiencing a midlife crisis and was unsure about her life goals. In my perspective, she's going insane. She unexpectedly colored her hair purple and joined up for motorbike training. I attempted to reconcile with her during the first week or 2 of her departure, but she refused to budge. Every significant message I sent her was ignored. She did respond to light ones, but her responses were brief and arrogant. I really don't recognize my wife anymore. Her personality appeared to transform in just 1 week. She treats me as if I never existed in her life, as if I were a piece of junk. Is this a protective strategy to make things easier for her by pushing her issues into the future? Has she truly changed and feels this way now? How on earth is that possible? I mean, I get that falling in love is a fantastic experience, but what will happen to her after a few months when the honeymoon period with this guy is gone and she wakes up from it all? I've had a lot of conflicting sentiments. I resent her for cheating on me, and I'm incredibly disappointed. But I also see and understand that the foundation of our marriage has always been strong. 5 weeks have passed since D-Day. She still hasn't filed for divorce and neither have I. I'm not sure, but I believe she's still seeing the person she cheated on me with. To be honest, I am split between saving our marriage and ending it. Right now, I don't care if we get back together or divorce. I honestly do not know what to do. If I file for divorce now, I might regret it later for being too quick, but I also can't keep living in this state of limbo. Still legally married, but she's already gone. Edit. For the first 4 days after she departed, I was unsure if she had cheated on me or not. Those were the toughest days because I felt so horrible and as if I had messed up everything. But as she admitted to cheating, those sentiments began to vanish. Even if I share responsibility for some aspects of our divorce, it is entirely her fault. She never showed me she was unhappy. She appeared pleased, as if she could have been an actress. She never mentioned being dissatisfied or what needed to change. To top it all off, she has cheated and continues to do so. This is finished. I no longer feel there is a way out of this. Also, I don't miss her right now. Sure, I miss who we were as a couple, but who is she now? Honestly, I almost feel sorry for the next guy whose heart she's bound to shatter. To be honest, I'm doing really well after my mother died. Of course, I had other issues at the time, but I was finally getting out of the funk and climbing back up. I wanted to go outside, drink, have fun, ride my motorcycle, etc., but then she cheated and kicked me back into the ravine. It will be all right in time, but I have to say that I am not looking forward to the holidays. No mother, no wife, and my father is alone after 40 years of marriage. But we will deal with it. Life carries on. Fortunately, I have a wonderful sister and a close circle of friends who I have known for over 20 years. I'm not ready to return to single life, but I am also a little excited. I haven't dated in almost 8 years, and I haven't gone out without first checking in with my partner. Of course, I fell as deeply as possible this year, but I'm confident that there will be better days ahead. One of the Redditors was completely correct about us marrying too young. When we married, I was 26 and she was 21. I haven't changed much in those years, but it's possible that she has changed much and has hidden those feelings for quite some time. Note, she stated that she is experiencing a midlife crisis. Those are her words, not mine. To go deeper into our common interests, hobbies, characteristics, and so on, I merely indicated in the post that we lived a stable life. I didn't go into depth since I didn't believe it would matter very much, and the post is already pretty lengthy. But here we go, hobbies and interests. We both enjoy gaming, although we have never played together. I'm now playing Age of Empires 4 on my PC, while she prefers to play The Witcher on her PlayStation 4. We both enjoyed watching a good Netflix show, especially after my mother died. We did it frequently, but even before that, we preferred staying in together to watch a nice movie rather than going out drinking. We would occasionally go to the movies or play pool, maybe once or twice a month. We also went out to dinner. We both liked motorcycles. I had a license and a bike, whereas she didn't. She always enjoyed sitting in the back seat of the bike as a passenger. When she was younger, her father would take her for rides on his bike. Apparently, she wants her own license and bike, something I was unaware of. Family time. We both enjoyed spending time with our family. We'd usually spend every other Sunday at her mother's house, with her stepfather, her father's house, with her stepmother, or my father's house. We enjoyed driving to nature sites and forests, as well as going for walks with our dogs. Personality traits. I enjoyed how spontaneous she could be. Well, she appears to be too impetuous, but that's okay. I sometimes overthink things, such as whether we should buy something, whether we actually enjoy it, how much money we have at the time, and so on. She would simply buy it or book the vacation I was apprehensive about. I admire that about her. I realize we were diametrically opposed in this regard. I adored her sense of humor. We had, or have, an incredible connection when it comes to humor. We had the exact same dry, goofy sense of humor and always had a good time together. I always admired her honesty and straightforwardness, until things went wrong. She was continuously telling me how she felt, what she liked and disliked. For example, approximately 4 years ago I became addicted to a video game. At the time I had no idea what I was doing wrong, but after a few weeks, she told me I wasn't making her happy and that I needed to pay more attention to our relationship, which I did. I kept gaming to a bare minimum. Bro, I enjoyed the way she spoke, walked and laughed. I adored her appearance. She had a beautiful grin. I even liked how she usually sneezes 8 to 10 times in a row. But as of right now, all of those sentiments I had, or have, are quickly dissipating. As for our sex life, I'll make it brief. We didn't have much sex. Since we got married, I'd guess it's been twice a month on average. In my opinion, it was always fantastic, though I'm not sure about hers anymore. Thinking back, we both always climaxed, unless she faked it, which I doubt. The sex act wasn't that thrilling. We always performed the same 3 or 4 positions and that was it. Update 1. Okay, I made several calls yesterday. In the Netherlands, we have something called a mediator, who handles all elements of divorce. This mediator handles the lawyer's work, including financial and emotional discussions. It's like an all-in-one individual assisting 2 people with their divorce. Today, we spoke with this mediator. Unfortunately, my soon-to-be ex's car broke down, and I had to pick her up. For yes, I had to for this to work for the divorce to be finalized. It is critical that both of us attend the meetings with the mediator. Anyway, the talk went well, as predicted. We both indicated our desire to be divorced, but the adultery was never acknowledged. I didn't think it was worth stating that the mediator is neutral and does not take sides. Also, in the Netherlands, there are no rules against cheating, thus she has the same rights as if she hadn't cheated. We remained seated at the table after the mediator had left, barely speaking. Our cats roaming about were the only diversion. After a few minutes, I inquired if she had anything further to say and she said, no. I thus said, okay then, I think you can go now because I don't want you here. She asked, can you take me home? I declined, saying, how you get home is your own problem. I'm not in the mood to drive 30 minutes to get you home. She looked emotional. I believe she expected me to drive her home because, in the past, I had done everything for her. After that, she called her mother, who will pick her up in about an hour. She left the house stating, I'm going for a walk for about an hour until mom arrives to pick me up. She seemed hurt and emotional as she departed, but I'm staying strong. I still notice a lot of unusual behavior on her part, and I believe she is still in the affair fog. Despite everything, I still love her for who she was, but for the time being, I'm staying tough and treating her as if she meant nothing to me. Edit. As of right now, she means nothing to me. She is just no longer the woman I loved and remained faithful to. Query. I have a query that requires some context. For the past 11 years, I have worked as a driver for a transportation firm called Supertrans. I resigned that job 4 months ago and got a new one with another transportation firm. Around 1.5 years ago, I secured my soon-to-be ex a job at Supertrans. She worked in the office, and I was the driver. I also know her affair partner, AP, who works in the warehouse at Supertrans. Because I worked there for 11 years, I know everyone in the Supertrans office. Everyone liked me, and I was close friends with some of the dispatchers. As far as I know, my old co-workers, her present co-workers, are aware that we are divorcing, but no one is aware that she is, or has been, having an affair with AP, a warehouse employee. Her direct co-worker, who works at the desk next to her, is a 32-year-old gay man who was also present on the night my wife cheated. I will call him Thomas. However, he left early that night. Thomas was one of my favorite persons at their office, and he also liked me a lot. My soon-to-be ex is currently on vacation and will return to work next Monday. I know Thomas likes me and wants the best for me. I'm seriously considering sending Thomas a message explaining what occurred and revealing the affair to him. Of course, I'd like to warn him that my wife has no morals and cannot be trusted. I mean, Thomas has to work with her on a daily basis. I want him to understand what kind of person my soon-to-be ex is. I also plan to inform him who the AP is because Thomas was with them the night she cheated. I want Thomas to understand how morally bankrupt the AP is, and I understand that this may appear to be a desire for vengeance. I suppose I do. This woman has put me through hell. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I would love to hear about her having a bad day at work next Monday since her co-workers knew she deceived me and had an affair. Really, everyone liked me. I've known the majority of her staff for more than 10 years. Furthermore, I have the option of telling or not telling anyone about her adultery. Okay, so this isn't the question I intended to ask. Should I do this? But I believe I've already made up my mind. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it and why you think I should or should not. Update 2. You've all been a tremendous assistance in my predicament. I must admit that I am mentally exhausted, but overall, I am doing better than I could have expected after only 6 weeks. I have a question regarding my soon-to-be ex-wife's current behavior. Is it common for my soon-to-be ex to treat everyone around her as trash, except her AP and her own parents, I suppose? She is clearly treating me horribly, with no respect, as if I were the worst spouse ever. She claims she's been miserable for several years, which I think is pure nonsense. Anyway, I don't really care what she's doing to me anymore. She's wrecking her life, not mine, but it's having an impact on others as well. My father gave her the sweetest note he'd ever given. And she didn't even respond with a thank you, nothing. After my mother died in February of last year, my wife would often take my father to a nearby amusement park. They both have subscriptions to it, so they go very frequently. My father adored her, and I am witnessing him age by the hour, which saddens me deeply. My soon-to-be ex-wife does not even send a thank you note. She simply leaves him to read. She also stated that she wanted to be close friends with my younger sister, but they have not spoken in several weeks. Also, my wife was meant to spend the day with her best friend, a common friend of ours, but she is now ignoring her. Her best friend texted her numerous times yesterday, wondering whether today was still on, but my wife did not respond or even check her texts. She also didn't answer the phone. So today, when they were meant to meet, the same thing happened. She didn't answer the phone. Her BFF sent her one more message, wondering whether she was still coming. No response. She didn't even read the messages, even though her WhatsApp status reveals she was online after they were sent. Needless to say, her best friend has been crying all day. She took the day off to spend with my wife, go shopping, and have fun, and then this happened. Is this typical behavior for someone in an affair fog, or might it be something else? I don't care what my wife is doing. I'm done with her, but this is so awful for her best friend. She's been crying on her couch all day because my wife treats her this way. While I'm composing this, another question comes to mind, but I believe I already have the answer. My soon-to-be ex-wife is telling everyone we broke up because we grew apart and she hasn't been happy in years. I believe it is typical for a cheater to make excuses and not be open about what happened and how they fell in love with someone else. Oh, I almost forgot something really crucial. Her BFF, a common buddy, really stayed with us for 6 months, from November 2021 to April 2022. She had recently gotten out of a nasty relationship and had no place to stay. We had an extra room, so we brought her in. Anyway, my wife and her best friend actually discussed everything, including our relationship and sex life. Everything. I talk to her best friend every day and she's been extremely lovely and completely honest with me. I asked her whether anything my wife had said about being unhappy with me for an extended length of time was genuine. BFF claims it's all lies. My wife has never mentioned anything to her, nor has she expressed any displeasure with me. Keep in mind that they told each other everything except their feelings of unhappiness. So either my soon-to-be ex-wife is clearly lying now, I'm not sure why, possibly to explain her cheating on me and fleeing our marriage, or she has kept her unpleasant feelings hidden from absolutely everyone but herself. I honestly do not know. But in my experience, I've never noticed her being dissatisfied with me, and BFF agrees. Many thanks again, everyone. Your help has been invaluable, and I would not be where I am today without it. Edit, I honestly hope karma hits her hard, sooner rather than later. Also, when people ask me why we're getting divorced, I tell them the truth about her being a selfish cheater. Just yesterday, a female acquaintance shared my communications from my wife and her. The discussion went like this. "Oh my God, honey, is it true you and your husband are separated?" My wife said, "Yes, sadly, this is the truth." The companion inquired, "Oh my God, no, what happened?" My wife responded, "Yeah, well, we just grew apart over the last few years and have different life goals. We chose to terminate it." Needless to say, I corrected this and told our friend the truth, that my wife cheated on me, pretended to be in love and abandoned me for another man. Everyone who learns the truth from me is shocked. By the way, no one, including myself, expected my wife to do this. Update 3. I plan to make a new post in a few weeks. For now, I'm fine. When I realized she was out there living her life without me, I began doing the same. I spoke with my soon-to-be ex-wife several times, and the conclusion seemed to be that she still loved me, but it wasn't fun anymore, which is not surprising given my mother's unexpected death in February. She claims to be in love with the AP, but without any strings attached. I never saw her being dissatisfied with me, and she even stated that she was unhappy with life in general. So what I believe happened was that she cheated, developed affections for AP and abandoned me for him. Once that was evident, I decided to let her go and focus on myself. At this point, I don't care what she's doing or if she'll return. I am fine either way. Work is going well. I've joined a gym and have been going 3 times a week. My muscles are hurting, and I've been talking to this lovely girl since childhood. Even though it's only friendship, I'm grateful to have a female friend with whom I can chat about anything. She lost her father last year, so we can all empathize with losing a parent. So sure, I'm fine. Regarding the divorce, we had to acquire a large number of documents, which were then forwarded to the mediator. We are currently waiting to hear from him before scheduling our next meeting and moving forward with the divorce. As of right now, I've already decided that the divorce will proceed, regardless of whether my soon-to-be ex-wife returns. Divorce is inevitable since the marriage has ended. Update 4. We'll sign our divorce papers and make it official in 4 days. This is going to be a long post because I haven't updated in nearly 4 months. Well, I made some blunders along the way, but I also made movements that restored my power and made me respect myself again. For starters, 5 months after the first shock, I no longer think about or feel affected by the adultery. So, for everyone going through a difficult period, please believe me, it will get better, and time is on your side. After adultery and our breakup, I committed blunders. I begged, pleaded, became angry, furious, and felt completely out of control, as if she had lost her mind. This persisted for around 2 months. Unfortunately, after this period, I decided to stop whining. I told her that I had given it a lot of thought and that I would still be open to seeing her and talking to her, that I believed there might be a future for us, but that I couldn't guarantee anything. I have not contacted her in the last 3 months, at least not about casual matters or the relationship. The only things I inquired about were our upcoming divorce, finances, and our shared house. I didn't just sit and wait for the past 3 months. I am now 32 years old, and for the first time in my life, I went to the gym to work out, muscle building specifically, as I have always been on the slim side. For the past 3 months I've been going to the gym 4 times a week with complete dedication. I'm also seeing an improvement in my muscles and appearance. However, this goes beyond. The gym not only improves my physical look, but it also benefits my mental health. At first I started working out to keep myself occupied and distracted, but 3 months later, I look and feel much better about myself. I'm rediscovering confidence that I didn't realize I had. Pro tip of the day. When you're going through a difficult moment, the gym seems to help both physically and mentally. Regarding our shared house, I spoke with the bank, and I'm able to lend more money and take on a larger mortgage. I have to pay my ex-wife approximately $65K for the house, but I am able and will do so. After signing everything and paying her, I will be the only owner of the mutual house, which is worth approximately $300,000. I'm not happy about having to pay her $65K, but in the long term, I'm far better off owning my own home, which is worth roughly 5 times that amount. Furthermore, she no longer has her own home. She officially lives with her mother again, but I know she frequently visits AP's place. I'm not contacting her, so how do I know? I will get to that. My ex and I share a mutual buddy. We never hang out together, but we do communicate on a regular basis. As far as I know, my ex left me to be with AP and immediately began a new relationship. I'm not sure what's going on with my ex, and at times it appears she's lost her mind. I try to keep my thoughts away from her, but occasionally they travel where they shouldn't. At the moment, I think I could refer to AP as BF because that's what he is now. However, I will stick with AP because that is how it began. Anyway, concerning AP and my ex-wife, karma is a B********, and it's beginning to bite hard. When my ex and AP first got together 5 months ago, everything appeared fine for them. However, the tables are starting to turn. AP is currently at home suffering from depression, which I know since a common acquaintance showed me screenshots of a chat between my ex-wife and her. Additionally, AP is currently out of work. Even when the infidelity initially occurred, I always felt superior to AP due to his lack of morality. And I had already concluded that he was worthless in comparison to me. Well, now I know for certain, which makes me feel like my ex-wife has gone insane. I'm not conceited, but I am certain that I am the catch and a far superior man than her AP. A little extra. At the beginning of their relationship, I was still contacting and warning her. Well, I think I was correct all along. Not only does AP prove himself to be the loser I suspected he was, but he also introduces her to a substance that has the potential to destroy her life. I discovered this through a mutual buddy. I haven't spoken with my ex-wife about it. If she wants to trash her own life, that is her choice, but it appears to be going bad quickly. My ex-wife is undoubtedly struggling and may even be questioning her own decisions. I hadn't spoken or seen her over the holidays, Christmas and New Year's. However, around a week into the new year, 2023, she texted me unexpectedly, asking if I was home and if she could come over. She came over to my house and the visit lasted only about 5 minutes. She stopped by to tell me she had spent Christmas Day alone, sobbing. She inquired about my holidays and how I was doing. I informed her that my Christmas was okay, but not the best. I lost my mother last year, and these were the first holidays without her, so it was decent but not amazing. However, I told her I was doing well, which I am. So for me, this was strange. The only thing I can think about from this entire visit and why she would be concerned about how I'm doing is whether she has any regrets. Time will tell. I also chatted with my ex's mother. My ex-mother-in-law called after New Year's to wish me a happy new year and best wishes. I must admit that I did not expect the call, but it was great to hear from her because she had been a part of our family for the past 8 years. My mother-in-law told me that my ex-wife hasn't been doing so well lately. Apparently, she is quite sad and crying a lot since she is mourning her marriage. My ex even told her mother, "I wish it wouldn't have to be like this," implying that she is having second thoughts. However, only my ex has the ability to reach out and make a move, which I do not anticipate happening at this time. The only authority I truly have is to grant her the divorce she requested and then walk away from her life, which I did. I am separating myself from her life, divorcing her, and improving myself every day. I apologize for the lengthy message, but I believe this covers all I needed to say. We will sign the divorce papers 4 days from now. Even though I'm doing well, I'm still human, and I still mourn our marriage and my ex-wife on occasion. I'm sorry to see what's happened to her, but I'm also aware that it's beyond my control and not my concern. Let me conclude by thanking everyone in this community. Many thanks. Without your assistance, I would not be where I am today, both emotionally and physically.